Welcome, everybody, to the long-awaited, in-depth spoiler review for Shin Gojira that I am going to be doing, and I brought with me a special guest. Introduce yourself.
Hello, people of the internet. This is Andres Perez, aka KaijuNoir of the KaijuNoir channel, as well as the Sons of Sarazawa podcast on Zazabar's channel.
Awesome. So, for those of you who don't know, I am a really big fan of the SOS and everyone involved. So, I'll make sure to leave all the links in the descriptions to everyone there. So, please go check them out. They really make some funny podcasts and some great reviews and everything like that. So, I would recommend it. And today we're going to be doing a pretty in-depth review of Shin Gojira because it's been a while since the movie's come out, so we've had
hmm
time to collect our thoughts, and now it's time to make a review of it. So
Make some small talk, make some conversation.
yeah, so uh, we're gonna start out with spoiler-free general thoughts on the movie. Do you want to start?
Okay, sure. Thank you very much. So I guess when it comes to my general thoughts on Shin Gojira, I apologize in advance if I end up accidentally like switching between the two titles. I'm just used to using the Japanese title when I'm talking to my students here in Japan. But when it comes to my overall thoughts on the movie, I feel like it's a very interesting, a very interesting and very experimental approach to this version of Godzilla. While at the same time, it still feels very respectful to the character and everything that came before it. I was first very skeptical when I started noticing in the trailers very about how much a lot of the clips seem to emphasize on the political aspects of the film. But given that I'm a huge fan of the political aspects of Godzilla 1984, I was really digging the narrative approach to this film, and so that plus the amazing visuals brought on by the directing duo of Hideaki Anno and Shinji Higuchi, I had a really great time with this movie. And I feel like it's a movie that has like so many details, so much um, content in it. I feel like I get something new out of it every time I feel like I notice something I didn't notice see before every time I watch the film.
Yeah, and I have to agree. This movie is it was I was very very worried going into it because I knew that it was going to be unlike any other Godzilla movie I have ever seen, and really unlike any other Godzilla movie that's ever been made. So it had me worried and very skeptical about what was going to be presented. But
hmm
the final cut of the movie, the final product, is absolutely amazing. I love this movie so much, and it just is so cool to see, you know, just amazing cinematography, amazing visuals. The soundtrack is great, and I just think it works on most levels, if not all, and just to some degree. And I would definitely recommend it. It's a really good movie, and I cannot stress that enough. So now we're going to be getting into kind of the background for how we saw this movie because we saw it in two different countries,
hmm
and there's definitely going to be a difference there between the two. So, once again, we'll have you start just so everyone can know what it was like to view the movie from Japan.
Okay, so funny enough, whenever I brought up Shin Gojira in a conversation with my students tend to range anywhere from like 8-year-old children to like adults in their 50s. But I would normally bring up the movie amongst my adult classes, and many of my students they were like had no idea that a new Godzilla movie was being made. It seemed like it seems like when it came to the marketing for Shin Gojira, it didn't really. When in terms of like for me, just to give context, I live in Gifu City in Japan, which is a very like countryside, a rural area with a very small very small downtown section. It's mostly it's basically if you watch the movie Frankenstein versus Baragon or War of the Gargantuas, it's kind of that sort of hillside landscape, countryside landscape. But outside of the local mall, I didn't see any sort of advertisement for Shin Gojira outside of anywhere. like if it comes to something, if it came to something like One Piece, I see like this year we had the movie One Piece film Gold. I saw marketing for that movie everywhere. I've seen marketing for Pokemon everywhere. I see it for Yokai Watch everywhere. But when it came for Shin Gojira, I didn't see anything outside the mall. So I guess that's I now looking back on it now, I can see why none of my students were aware of it. I mean, sure, they're not big movie fans, but even people who don't follow movies in Japan, they still know what Dragon Ball is. They still know what One Piece is because it's so goddamn prevalent. But yeah, when I came to actually like watching the movie itself, I was pleasantly surprised by how many people were in the movie theater. I mean, there weren't as many people as you would see in like a Marvel movie, which those are always popular. Whenever I try to see one in Japan here in Gifu, but about maybe a third of the room was full for Shin Gojira. About like the two times I watched the film, there were always at least. It was one of those things where like there are people everywhere in the theater room, but there's always like maybe like two or three empty seats between everybody. So like that kind of uh, environment. Outside of that, the biggest difference I noticed when it comes to watching a movie in Japan is that everyone is very respectful. Everyone is very quiet. Nobody makes a sound. So it was a very comfortable experience. The only downside to that is that if you're watching something like a Marvel movie or any sort of comedy, nobody laughs. They're that hardcore when it comes to being respectful. They won't laugh. So here I am, like laughing at all the jokes in Civil War, and I'm always feeling embarrassed because I feel like my laughing is like bothering the people around me. In my head, I'm thinking, wait a minute, this is what the movie wants me to do. Screw you guys. How dare you? How dare you not embrace American sense of humor?
um,
But in all seriousness, though, it was a very pleasant experience. Unfortunately, I couldn't understand like 99% of what they were saying because even my Japanese, I back then in July, my Japanese is I didn't have as better of an understanding as I do now. And even then, my Japan understanding of Japanese is still very limited, mostly when it comes to vocabulary. The grammar, I'm almost got a handle on that one.
yeah, I speak very, very limited Japanese, so I expected the movie when it came out in Japan to be leaked online for us in America who had to wait months and months to see it. But sadly, it wasn't, and I expected that if it was, I would be able to work my way through it. After
Hmm.
seeing the movie, I'm actually thankful that it didn't get leaked because I would have been more clueless and I would have not liked it really, probably at
Hmm.
all, had I not had enough context. Because one thing that I noticed, and they even made sure to bring it up in the movie, was that they are very kind of official with the way they talk in this movie.
Oh, very much so. Even like some of my students who did went to see the movie, they couldn't understand a lot of what was being said on screen because it was like the highest form, the most formal, most professional form of Japanese that they were using.
Yeah, and yeah, I'm basic, so I would have been very very screwed when it came to comprehension of this movie. But I think the biggest difference between seeing it in Japan and America, other than the fact that in America we had subtitles, was that we had the longest wait for the movie to come out, where it was rumored to come out in August, and then the
Hmm.
date got pushed back to September, and then all of a sudden it showed up in October 11th. So it was really uncertain when it was going to come out. There was very
Hmm.
little marketing here, probably less so than Japan. We only got one trailer and one TV spot,
Hmm.
and it was hard to steer away from spoilers, which was something I attempted. And that's another big difference is that when the movie came out in Japan, that was the first place it came out. But because it had an international release before it hit America,
Hmm.
pretty much the biggest points of the movie had already been spoiled for me, and I had already seen clips of it from one place or another, and
Hmm.
I kind of felt the obligation to see them because I was running at the time I was doing almost every other day news videos talking about Godzilla because that's what people expected was
Hmm.
Americans needed to know what the movie was and what was going on. So
Like the people must know.
so I decided that I was going to be that guy to help them out, and
Mm-hmm.
um, I think that definitely compromised my experience for seeing it because I
Mm-hmm.
knew I knew about a lot of the big points of the movie, and I knew about the ending, and so although I did know about most of the kaiju scenes, I
Mm-hmm.
do think that I really appreciate this movie more for the plot because of that, because I was deprived of the plot and the characters. So,
Mm-hmm.
seeing it in America was really not me going to a Godzilla movie. It was me going to a political movie that had clips of Godzilla that at that point I would have already seen. So I think that is probably the biggest difference. Is just the spoiler culture in America was huge for this movie.
Mm-hmm. And the thing you mentioned, how it felt like it felt like a long time for the movie to eventually come to America. I feel like this was perhaps like the shortest amount of time it's taken for a Godzilla movie to come to America, especially since when you consider how most of the Millennium Godzilla movies didn't come to America until like a year afterwards. If you remember when the official release for Godzilla Final Wars was put on when Godzilla Final Wars was put on DVD in 2005. And I feel like the reason that was could probably be a reason why we had you guys ended up with a subtitled version as opposed to an English dub, because there just wasn't enough time to make an English
Mm-hmm.
dub, or there wasn't enough time to remove all those Japanese subtitles to make way for the English subtitles. So that could because it's like, so it came out in July in Japan in July, then August, September, so only like 3 months. It only
Mm-hmm.
took like 3 months to get for the movie to come statesides. And so I feel like this was in to make a counterpoint. I feel like this was actually the shortest amount of time it's taken for a movie to come to America.
I would definitely agree with that because I mean most of the Godzilla movies didn't even get U.S. releases.
Hmm.
Most of them didn't. But I think the biggest difference is the internet nowadays is obsessed with things that they don't get. And so the fact that the movie came out in Japan, the internet is
Hmm.
there's no debating it, much bigger nowadays than it was in 2004. So Shin
Hmm.
Gojira was much more prominent with Godzilla fans, like much more. Everyone knew it was a thing. No one was like back
Hmm.
when the Millennium series was coming out. I didn't know that it was coming out. I didn't know that they were making the
Hmm.
movies because just there was not as much buzz about it. And so nowadays, I think the big difference is everyone knows and everyone wants it. So it's a little bit different.
That's true. Like people like us are always like we're always like trying to search, like scouring the globe or scouring the internet equivalent of like scout the internet equivalent of scouring the globe for any sort of scraps of information we could find. It's like it felt like just yesterday where it was like it felt like yesterday where it was like announced in like I want to say mid to late 2015 that we were going. I think it was like somewhere in like mid 2015 or late 2015 that it was announced that Shinji Higuchi and Hideaki Anno were announced to be the directors of this movie. And it's like they were just announced, and already people were like, the Godzilla community, the Japanese Tokusatsu Godzilla kaiju fan community was already like in an uproar, or were like in celebration of this tiny bit of news. Like we knew about it like the moment it was announced in Japan, and then since then every single like scrap we are all there, we it would cause a big discussion. So yeah, I can see how like 3 months, it's really like relatively it's not that long of a time span, but in internet time it seems like an eternity.
Definitely, and yeah, it was. I would say it was fun the way because it made me I think appreciate, like I said, it made me appreciate the movie more for being a movie instead of just like a Godzilla scenes that I wanted to see. It made me appreciate the
Hmm.
majority of the movie instead of just that. So I would argue that it was probably for the better, even though it did kind of make it a little less special to see Godzilla on screen.
Yeah, especially considering how this movie attempts to take Godzilla in very different directions. It almost feels like you need to watch the movie to give it context. where it's like it's
Yes.
so weird because it's meant to clash with the more realistic take on the human drama.
Yeah, there was a lot of controversy when the movie came out day one in Japan, and in America there was a lot of buzz about Godzilla's new abilities, and
How
I
do you think I
was
how do you think I felt when I was like like in the time like when I was waiting for Shin Godzilla's eventual American release? I'm just like thinking to myself, "Oh boy, are you guys in for something?"
yeah, I was quick on the gun for that one. I was the minute I heard about some of these things, some of the changes they made to Godzilla, I kind of quickly turned against the movie, and it took a slap against the face pretty much for me to finally sit back down and go, okay, I have to see it. I have to understand why they did this and what's going on before I can judge it. But yeah, I was all over the place with this one after hearing about some of the things that they did.
Now, do you think would you recommend people know about Godzilla's new abilities going into the before going into the movie so that they won't be as shocked, or do you think being shocked will help them help adds to the viewing experience?
It definitely hurt. I would argue that it hurt not knowing, because I saw the movie with some Godzilla fans who
Hmm.
absolutely hated it, whereas I
Hmm.
had time to prepare. I knew what was coming up, so
Hmm.
I was able to get ready for it and kind of get ready to understand it, whereas these
Hmm.
people were seeing it for the first time, and therefore
Hmm.
they just immediately did not like it. They wrote it off as very goofy and just really ridiculous, and so I think
Hmm.
I think I would more of want people to know about it. That way, they're not taking off guard, thinking that, oh, this is going to be a classic Godzilla movie '54 remake, and then
Hmm.
it's something we've never seen before.
Although it's kind of funny you say that because in a way it is a 54 remake and at other times it isn't.
Hmm.
Where it's like it has so many elements, especially right down to like the sound effects and the music
Yeah,
and the overall plot structure of Godzilla shows up, he's fucking shit up, and the humans have to find a way to stop him. That
yeah.
that is a Godzilla movie at its essential, at the central core of it. The only difference is all the little details added to it.
The only
It's like
difference is
it's
Godzilla's more different than we've ever seen him.
yeah, yeah. It's like the story's the same, the structure's the same. Only difference is the human perspective has changed as well as the monster.
Hmm. Well, I want to ask you this, because this is something that is I've kind of been confused about. So,
Hmm.
do you think that this Godzilla, the characterization of Godzilla, is more or less faithful to the original Godzilla than the '98 movie? Because
Definitely more closer to the original than the 98. Are you sure you're saying 98 as in American TriStar
as
Sony
an
Pictures?
American TriStar.
Okay. Yes, it's way more faithful because, with the thing is Godzilla this version of Godzilla, he's a very unnatural sure, like you can say the original make the argument that the original Godzilla is a very angry character. He's seeking out vengeance. He's seeking out something to unleash his pain on. He's specifically looking for a target, whereas this one is just an emotionless walking storm. But on the other hand, 98 was a monster that was constantly running from any threats it detected, whereas this version of Godzilla always faced threats head on, very similar to 94, especially when provoked.
That's something that I struggle with too, is because this is a very different Godzilla. It has two major new abilities, and it had yeah, it has two major new abilities, and it has a completely different origin stories that alludes to. We'll talk about this later. Alludes to
Hmm.
a completely different character than Godzilla later on in the in what might be the sequels,
Hmm.
whereas 98 was almost I hate to say it, but I think it was almost more similar to what Godzilla was, which was just a thing turned into a monster that comes on land and messes stuff up, whereas this one was
It's still a thing that turns into a monster. It's only a different thing.
it's a different thing, but at the same time, it's a different thing that's going to eventually turn into something that is not Godzilla at all.
Yeah.
Whereas 98 at least would stay as more of a Godzilla like character. And even if you've seen the animated series for 98, they definitely brought the characterization more full circle, gave him the atomic breath, and kind of helped out explain, like, this is still Godzilla. But I'm not saying that this movie's worse in any way. It's not. It is not.
No.
But Godzilla is way cooler in this movie than he is in that one. But I struggle to want to say it, because I do believe that 98 is almost more faithful. Just the movie is so much worse that it pains me to say it. And also this one's Toho, so this one, like, you can't really say it's not, because it's the founders of Godzilla doing this, so it's hard.
That's the thing. It's Godzilla. In my opinion, that this is a change that I feel. This is a change that I am not bothered by whatsoever. I remember talking about this with my friend Christopher Martinez, the artist behind the Night of the Fire Beast comic book series. If you guys don't know what the Fire Beast series is, definitely check out the 2 reviews I've made on my channel. But from in my conversations with Chris Martinez, he and I both kind of agree where it's like, yes, this is definitely a very new concept that's been brought to the table. Godzilla has never had this kind of origin before. His origin has always been in the past, as well as being an instantaneous. Here, it's the change, going from one thing to the final thing. It's a very slow change that you see on screen over maybe about, like, for the first half hour of the film. That's something we've never seen be done before with Godzilla, and I feel like this is for me, I welcome this new approach. I welcome this new change. I think it's very interesting for the character. I feel like it helps make this incarnation more unique. It actually helps keep the audience on edge, because at this point we all know Godzilla. We all know what he can do. So I feel like throwing a curveball at us is really the only way you can make a Godzilla movie be surprising to people who already know everything about Godzilla. And on top of that, it's like, for me, I'm never bothered by this type of drastic change, because I feel like the final result is still in tone. It still matches the look, feel, and the tone of the original of what came before. It's still respectful to what came before. And like I said in my own review on my of Shin Godzilla on my channel, if I ever want to see, like, a classic approach to Godzilla again, there's still, like, 60 years of a 60-year backlog of media for me to look back on, to watch or to experience.
Yeah, and like I said, it kind of, like, I do like this Godzilla so much more. I welcome the change. I love it, but I find it funny how people are so quick to turn against the monster of Zilla, whereas they will defend this version. Well, not everyone's defending this version. I see this a lot in my comments, but most people defend this version of Godzilla, and I find it funny because neither of them are the original. Neither of them are similar to the original in a lot of ways. So I just found that funny. Like, if picture this, if we got the same movie of Shin Godzilla, I'm going to say, because I'm going to screw up the Japanese, and you're going to be the only one who actually knows that I do. But but if we got the same movie, but instead of Godzilla, we had Zilla just replacing his scenes, and he did the exact same things, but he was just in the same position, like in the same place. Would people still be against this movie, or still be for this movie, or would they be against it? Is it just the fact that the 98 movie sucked, or is it the fact that the monster sucked?
I think it's a large part of it is due to the 98 movie sucking as hard as it did, and as well as the fact that Godzilla does not act like Godzilla.
Yeah.
I mean, like sure, Godzilla himself, his design in Shin Godzilla is drastically different than anything we've seen before. Yet it's like the silhouette, he still has that same basic silhouette, that same type of body structure that still keeps him relatively familiar.
Hmm.
So yeah, maybe if it was changed further to the point where we would have a more of a Zilla type character design in place of Shin Godzilla for this Shin Godzilla movie, but he still acts the way he does. I still feel like people would want to get behind it if you switched out Shin Godzilla with Zilla, but still keep everything else the same, because the story itself is still very, like I said, still everything else is still very faithful to Godzilla. So I feel like people would still probably have the same kind of reaction they would have to when they first saw Shin Godzilla's design.
Hmm. Yeah,
So I'm not sure. It's an interesting question.
yeah. I don't know.
But I think like there are more problems to Godzilla 98 than
Hmm.
just the
Oh yeah.
monster design itself.
Yes.
Even people who don't give a shit about Godzilla still have problems with the movie itself.
Yeah. It's not a good movie. Well, it's not. It's not a terrible movie, but it's not good.
It's no good.
Okay, so
No es bueno.
getting into the spoiler section of the video finally, we'll start out with. I guess we'll start out with the plot. I don't know why I put characters first, but we'll start out with the plot. I'm gonna run through it quickly, and we'll talk about. I'll
Mm,
stop occasionally, and we'll talk about everything from the start to there. So,
yeah,
um,
just put on if you're ready for montage mode, just put on that Evangelion music.
oh man. Okay, so the plot of Shin Gojira is there's a boat called the Glory Maroon that's being investigated. When it's being investigated, a huge eruption of water spurts out of the water. Now we get a lot of scenes of people trying to figure out what to do about this, what it is, if it's a underwater volcano or if it's whatever it may be. They're trying to figure out how to handle it, how to get as little casualties as possible because it winds up collapsing in underwater tunnel and winds up flooding the tunnel and crushing a car as we see in the movie. Meanwhile, there's mysterious footsteps going on and blood leaking through the tunnel, and they can't tell if it's blood or some sort of other liquid. As this is all happening, we're getting many political scenes jumping back and forth from conference room to conference room of them talking about how to handle this, up until a giant tail arises from the water. So let's talk about everything up to there. What were your thoughts
Mm.
at this point of the movie?
Okay. Everything kind of had a bit of a pseudo documentary feel to it, especially when we're looking at different viewpoints of what would you call them? Like investigators looking at the a possible suicide. Act of suicide on the Glory Maroon. We see several instances where we see news footage. We even see some images of teenagers and young adults just like evacuating the underwater tunnels. And just a lot of stuff going on, a lot of confusion, and a lot of people have no idea what's going on. They're trying to make sense out of it all. So it's an interesting way of starting the movie off by making you feel like it's as close to the real world as possible.
One thing that I absolutely love about this portion of the movie is how chaotic it is because
Hmm.
you don't just get suddenly this geyser rises out of the water and now we're in one point talking
Hmm.
about what to do about
Hmm.
this possible underwater volcano. We
Hmm.
jump location to location, seeing different groups of people like trying to handle this. We go from a conference room in like this. I think it's like maybe a nuclear kind of room. I couldn't tell what that main conference room was that they kept walking through
Wa-
back and
Was that
forth.
was that the one with the windows on one side of the room? Is that the one with the long table or the one with the
No,
couch with the
it's
couches?
no, it's the one that we don't see much of it, but we see it right at the start, it's like there's this big, huge screen, and then there's tons of desks around the screen, and they barely spend any time in there. They walk through
Oh,
it
okay,
once.
big screen. Okay, yeah,
So
yeah.
I don't know what that is, but like we go from there. They run into this. I think it's probably on a lower level of the building. They go to this room where they're trying to figure out what to do when they're looking at a screen at a small table. Then they go
Hmm.
upstairs to a more conference room kind of place. Then they go to a meeting room with the big long table. Then they go back to the conference room. Very chaotic. Creates
Yeah,
a
yeah.
sense of dread, like a sense of emergency. We need to get this handled before anything bad happens.
Although
And
you can sort of see, you can already tell, I guess not tell. This is something that's like, I guess for the Japanese audience, they can catch up, they can catch up on this. I'm not sure if that's the right phrase to use. Well, pick up on that. They will pick up on this, but I guess for an American audience, this is something they would have to know in advance. But you can, someone who is aware of the political climate in Japan right now, the sort of chaotic nature, the whole switching from room to room, moving from conference meeting to another conference meeting to another conference meeting, just to decide on the most simplest of options. That's you can like right off the bat, they're showing you, okay, this is a bit of a political satire right here.
yeah,
It's like,
it's
okay, we're done. Let's go to the next move. Well, like, okay, we checked off the first list on our list of 200 things we need to get done. Let's go to the next room then. You're like, here we go again.
yeah. I guess you could call it like a commentary, a social commentary or
Oh
whatever.
yeah, totally. Or maybe
I
political
love
commentary.
political commentary. I love the political commentary in this movie. Like, really, really interesting if you know what it's about. And I thought that it worked very well for educated people because my theater, once again in America, no one really knew what that was. I had to explain it to
Mm.
the people I saw
Yeah,
it with, but
and
once
like
I explained it, they appreciate it.
I mean, even people who are aware of like, of course, like this movie is no doubt about it. This movie was inspired by the events of the 2011
Uh,
um, Tohoku earthquake, tsunami, and the Fukushima power plant incident. Um, But yeah, people in America, they are aware of it, but they don't know the political climate that resulted from it. A lot of mistrust and negativity and hatred towards the Japanese government over their incompetence over that entire tragedy slash debacle. So they would have to know about it in advance, saying, okay, this is what's going on in Japan right now. This is what this movie is about, and so get used to it because that's going to essentially be this whole movie is just essentially one big middle finger to the Japanese government.
yeah, and the events of the 311 that is the main allegory of this movie was really deep stuff, and I made sure to try and educate people on it. I did a PSA response where someone did a PSA and I added on to what they had to say to try and help people understand. I didn't go
Mhm.
too in depth with Fukushima meltdown. I was gonna save that for later. I still am, but for the most part, this portion of the movie is really, really good at pointing out kind of the flaws. Well, the whole movie is really good at pointing out the flaws of they didn't really handle the situation how they should have.
Mhm. Mhm.
And yeah.
And yeah, already like as soon as that tail comes out, it's like they already kind of like put together some sort of bullshit excuse or some sort of like message, BS message to give to the press. And as soon as the prime minister is up there, he's like, Mr. Prime Minister, he's like, what? And then
Oh, that
bam,
scene's
Godzilla's already
awesome. When he just turns to, he just yells, "It has," and then it cuts to it. Really
yeah,
great way to throw you into it.
yeah,
So,
yeah. Then smash cut to Godzilla's eventual reveal.
yeah. So I guess I'll take us through this portion of the movie.
Mm,
So the tail rises out of the water, and then this creature is slowly making its way towards land. As it does, it is pushing just tons of water onto the streets. Boats are being pushed through bridges and onto land. Once again, very reminiscent of a lot of what happened during the 311. So, um, really, I'm assuming it really connected with Japanese audiences, and um, It didn't really with American audiences. It was people here saw it as comedy, which is why I made my video. Was because I was mad that people thought it was funny. But,
Hmm.
but
Yeah, it's that's the kind of a problem. It's like
yeah,
it's a very subjective problem. This movie was clearly made for a Japanese audience in mind, so I want to know if whether or not Japan was seriously considering an American release, or was it Funimation that approached them to have a theatrical American release? Because
it,
it's possible that Toho said maybe America's not gonna get this, so why we're not gonna bother with this until sometime down the line with like some cheap DVD release.
originally it was a DVD release, but
Hmm.
Toho Toho signed on to, at the time it was about 400 different countries for distribution. So I would assume that it was not just Funimation's approaching and being like, "Hey, could you let us release this movie in America?" I'm assuming it was more of them being like, "Okay, we're going to do a large scale international release. Here you go." And
Hmm.
because I don't think it really makes sense for, if there's 400 countries, I don't think
Hmm.
Funimations is distributing in all
Yeah.
400. So,
But it's possible that a lot of those countries could have been in the Asian region, which probably
yeah,
would have been more aware of what went on in Japan in 2011.
yeah, that's true.
Considering that Japan is the biggest first world country to a lot of its neighbors, a lot of its neighbors view Japan as its biggest like first world country to visit.
Um, yeah, so Godzilla is slowly making his way on land. They hold a press conference to say this creature will not make landfall. It will crush itself to death under its own weight, which was the complete opposite of what they told the prime minister to say at the press conference. But he said it to try and I think he says like calm the public. And
Right.
as he's giving the announcement that this creature cannot make landfall, suddenly it is on land, moving towards everyone, and it is revealed that Godzilla has multiple forms in this movie. His first form being what a lot of people have made up a name for it, like Katu-Kam or something weird like that.
Kamata-kun.
I have no idea what that
Kamata-kun.
is. I
Kamata is named after the district that this form of Godzilla roams through, the Kamata district. So they called him Kamata-kun. Kun being a suffix added to a child's name to make it sound cute. Usually, like chan is for like girls, and kun is for boys. But sometimes chan can also be for boys as well. I mean, look like the Japanese character Shin-chan.
uh, do you,
And now you know. And no
by the,
is half the battle.
Dang, I did not know that. I just have been referring to it as Eelzilla because,
And you claim yourself to be the Shin Godzilla news guy.
yeah, I always thought that that was just like a pet name people gave it. I didn't know it had an actual meaning.
It is a pet name.
I did not know it had a meaning at all. I just thought that people were like, "Oh, look at this thing." And yeah, so I guess there you
We'll
go.
call, imagine like, oh, we'll call him Kamata-kun. It means shit for brains.
Yeah, I did not know what it meant, and I really just expected it to be like a cutesy little like, "Oh, he's so adorable, like a giant gross puppy dog" kind of thing. So I always dismissed it. But
It's like a pug. It's all wrinkly but still cute at the same time.
yeah. So he makes landfall. He is just this grotesquely. He's like, it's really weird to describe because it looks like if an eel grew feet and then bled out of its gills. That is my best explanation of what it looks like. And then he's got the dorsal fins on his back. He makes landfall, and he has a very large chest bone, which I found to be a really cool explanation for how he can stay upright, which is because if you pay attention, his chest bone drags through the ground, keeping him off the ground and upright. So I thought that was a really cool explanation for why his final design has a big, huge chest bone, but other than that, he's this weird-looking monster who has two legs and crawls around through the city. Eventually, it is decided that there will be a defensive military attack. After much debate over whether they can do that and whose jurisdiction it falls under, they decide that there will be a helicopter attack before the helicopters can reach Kamata-kun. Is that how you say it?
Yeah, I guess that's a funny thing when it comes to American pronunciation. I've noticed with American pronunciations of Japanese words, we always put a lot of stress on the second vowel when it's really like the first vowel. I guess instead of Kamata-kun, it's Kamata-kun. So it's most like, I guess there is, the thing is like with Japanese, there rarely is there any emphasis on any syllable. But if you want to put an emphasis on if you feel like you need to put an emphasis on any syllable, just try with the first syllable. So instead of Kamata-kun, just Kamata-kun.
Okay, so
that's how I've been able to comprehend Japanese so far.
All right.
So like the name Akira, we always say Akira, but it's actually Akira.
Yeah, I've heard people. I've heard that pronunciation, and I just feel like I'd butcher it, so I just say Akira. But so Kamata-kun actually winds up evolving into Godzilla's third evolution. Also has a pet name. I once again dismissed it because I didn't think it was anything. And this form is a much more Godzilla-looking creature. Very red. I think that's a really cool touch, is just how red he gets. But he evolves in a kind of odd fashion. How do you think about the evolution? Because I thought it was like a little bit ridiculous. It was almost like if you laid down...
I thought the special effects looked like shit, in my honest opinion. I don't know what's up with the weird curvy lines that look super... They look superimposed on the CG design. It looks like something out of like a Sci-Fi Channel original movie.
Yeah,
it looked like a filter. Really it didn't look like it was part of its skin. It looked like a filter.
So for those of you who don't know or don't remember what we're talking about, when he's growing, instead of just like expanding, his skin gets all wavy and bumpy, and it like waves up his body, and it doesn't look like it should be happening. Like, it looks out of place. It would look more natural had he just sprouted up. But he just grows really awkwardly, and it waves up his body until
something like the Hulk transformation makes a lot more sense than this. You don't see the Hulk skin getting all wavy.
Yeah, but I thought it looked really cheesy. Like, I thought it looked like I've compared it to this before. If you lay down one of those sponge dinosaurs and spray a hose on it, it will slightly expand. Looked just like that. I don't know if you've seen the Simpsons episode, but there's an episode when Bart gets a sponge dinosaur and sprays it with a hose, and it turns into a real dinosaur, and then it turns out that was just a dream. But it looks just like that. It doesn't... I just found that to be a really clunky way of showing. I thought it would have been maybe cooler had he walked into like a smoky area where we didn't see him. We hear a roar, and then out comes this much bigger form, something like that, other than just the weird expansion.
Another thing is, like, did you ever get like a Pokemon vibe from all these transformations?
Yeah, I mean, not me specifically, but I definitely saw that a lot in my comments.
It's like I've even seen fan art of someone depicting 3 stages of Godzilla as a new Pokemon in Pokemon Go.
Oh man,
it's like I can imagine. I can hear the music in my head. Like he's changing. Do 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 dun 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 dun. Dun 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 dun! Congratulations, your Shin Godzilla has evolved into Turkey Godzilla.
Yeah, after seeing the movie, it doesn't look like a turkey. The pictures that were released beforehand looked like a turkey, and that there was that was my favorite part of this movie, actually. There was no footage of this second form or the third form at all. No one leaked anything.
I guess it's mostly due to how limited its screen time is.
Yeah, he has very little screen time, but for what he has, I think was super cool. I thought it was really sweet to see him on screen. He does have an awkward like body shape in the fact that his neck is like 50 feet and it's unproportional to the rest of his body, and they really show that off. We get a really sweet shot of it inside of a helicopter, and it like pulls back and it reveals his the scale of him, but the neck is way unproportioned to the rest of the body, so it's kind of clunky. But other than that, I thought this design was really cool. It was meant to be with the 54 vibes that it gave off. Like, that was not unintentional, because he has not only the 54 roar, but we get some classic 54 music playing, and it was awesome.
Oh yeah, like the music they chose for it is like a track that has really never been used out after 54. Like, as often as Akira Ifukube has reused his tracks but in the past, he never used that track, the dun dun dun. Like, you never hear that, so it was really cool as a Godzilla fan to hear that track again.
Yeah, definitely. And then he has a rampage through the city. Not really a rampage, actually. He more just walks in a straight line and then stops. But it is really cool to see, because they somewhat have a throwback to the 54 sequence with the train, in the fact that in this one, there is a stationary train that his tail winds up slapping off the track, which is kind of reminiscent to the 54 scene that everyone knows, where the footsteps and the train hits it. But the train goes flying off. It's a pretty cool throwback, in my opinion, and I feel like I don't know if I'm the only one who got this feeling, but the scale of Godzilla's second or third form, it kind of looked like it was scaled to be the same exact size as the 54. Like, it was smaller than the buildings. It definitely was not the 400 feet that we get later in the movie, but I just got really major 54 vibes, and it was amazing. It was really special, and I know it was intentional, but they did a really good job. Like, it's good that it was intentional. I mean, that meant that they meant to put it there, and it worked. So, what were your thoughts on this whole scene?
I think watching it the first time around, I was more distracted by the bad special effects and the interesting use of stock sound effects than I was with the actual design itself. Looking at it the second time and later the third time around with your personal fan cut of it, I still don't have that much of an opinion on the second form, other than it just looks very similar to the first form, only with tiny arms and it's red. Although I'm more fascinated with its biology than I am with the design itself. I really like the scene where it notices, and where Godzilla started noticing how high his temperature was. He lets out like a screaming, like a painful roar before he starts rushing back into the water. Yeah. I feel like it's one of the few times where we see Godzilla as like a vulnerable creature. We get a little hint of what kind of hint of, not a personality, but a hint of like, this is a feeling creature. This is not like a mindless monster. It's got like it has like a survival instinct in him.
That was probably one of the only traits like that we got of this Godzilla, though. But yeah, I thought that was like, you see the back starts to light up red, and you can tell that it hurts him. And
it's like, oh shit.
He immediately turns around and books it back to the ocean, and that the way he runs, this is one of the things that when I watched it immediately connected to Zilla, was because the way he runs, he arches his back so his legs are straight down but his back is curved over, and then he sprints in that position. And I know I'm not the only one to notice that it was kind of reminiscent to the way Zilla moved, but I really thought that was a cool touch that, you know, like you said, he noticed that he was in pain. And they have that later in the movie when he gets hurt and he reacts to it. So I thought that was cool to show that this Godzilla, unlike many, is actually vulnerable.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, I did send you an image on Facebook of the Pokemon Go Shin Godzilla fan art.
I'll check that out right now. Yeah. Sadly, you're going to have to deal with some clicks for a minute because my mouse is broken, so I have to click harder, but...
No problem. Smash that mouse!
Smash it. Here we go. Oh, jeez. Eel Goji, Turkey Goji, Shin Goji. Nice.
Credit to whoever this is. Sugar Beasts 07.
Oh, at least they left their name.
Yes, thank God. Oh, the smartest artists always leave their names.
I've been yeah.
Unless you're one of those assholes who tend to like crop out the artist's name because they find it too distracting, and
That's
then
so
post it
stupid.
elsewhere.
That's so cheap. Side note: I've been getting a lot of hate today because I posted a picture of a fan art of Shin Gojira someone did on Instagram, and there was no credit to the artist where I found it. I just found it. Someone
Hmm.
posted it, and they left like, "I'm not the artist," and so I took the picture and
Uh-huh.
reposted it, and I said, "Credit to original artist. I did not make this." I've been under
Yeah.
so much hate for not tracking down the original artist and crediting them. So
Hmm.
it just goes to show this fan base is so easily angered.
I
Um,
guess it's just that artists just often get abused on the internet, or just maybe taken advantage of a lot, or maybe just go through a lot of stuff because, like, for an art, I guess because I have several friends who do make a living as artists, it's it's kind of difficult and really frustrating when you're not given proper credit, or when people try to get free art out of you. And so a lot of the people, there's kind of like this mentality in the internet to, because there's such a large presence of artists on the internet, because that's really the only way they can get exposure nowadays. I guess there's kind of been a mentality that's been formed to protect artists at all costs.
yeah. And
Which,
I like whoever drew this. I have full respect to you. It is an amazing piece of art. It's a picture of Godzilla in his final form standing in the city after he's done the atomic breath, and all the buildings are melted around him. Really, really cool picture. And I do art as a hobby. If this person does it as a job, I would understand it's very professional. But I just found that amazing how quick people were going to turn on me because I did
mhm,
not find the original artist before posting the picture. So
yeah.
just side note, this fandom's easily angered,
Hmm.
and I've tried to be better with that after I was quick to judge this movie, but
Triggering intensifies.
yeah.
Trigger me timbers.
So moving on with the plot of this movie. After Godzilla returns to sea, we get a lot of downtime. I think it's about 30 minutes of downtime, which involves a massive, a huge gathering of government people from a whole bunch of different organizations trying to figure out what just came on land, what that was, and how much damage it caused. They even try to figure out if radiation was a result of the monster, which it turns out to be, or just a power plant meltdown, or something of the sorts. So there's quite a bit of downtime, and then we're introduced to a new character. Her name is Kyoko Ann Patterson. She's an American, and she brings with information that this creature is called Godzilla. There was this dude who predicted who predicted that he was going to come on land. It's revealed that his origins was, and I love this origins just because the reference was um, kind of like a micro species almost that was offshore of Odo Island, which I love that. It was offshore
Hmm.
of Odo Island, fed on nuclear waste, mutated into this creature that wound up coming on shore, and I think that at one point they say it almost flattened and expanded as it got on shore, and that is the second form that we see is when he's on shore. So new origin story, and then there's so they try and figure out his biology. Not really to any success at this point in the movie, and then he shows back up. So everything from him leaving to right before he gets back. What are your thoughts on all of this downtime?
I feel like this is it starts to get to the point where the political satire kind of feels a bit too long for its own good. I feel like if the biggest problem with this film is definitely its pacing.
Mm-hmm.
Or I know in your fan cut you summarized a lot of the points that were made throughout the film, and even then your fan cut was only like 2 hours long, which
Yeah.
was, if that goes to show you just like how easy it could be to just sum up what's been going on and still have a decently paced film.
To be fair, the only reason I did that was because there was no existing footage online of what
I
happens
think
in
I
between there.
figured that was the case.
Yeah, but I made sure because the reason I made the fan cut was because my brothers did not get the opportunity to see this movie in theaters, and
Hmm.
I really wanted them to see it. And so when I put it together, I realized that there was some gaps in the movie that I did not have any footage of, and
Hmm.
I needed to do something about it. So I decided to put title cards on screen explaining what happened. But yeah, it definitely could have gone by quicker. That's for sure.
Mm. I feel like the only really significant part that you would need to focus on is definitely Kayoko Ann Patterson's introduction because of how integral she is to the plot of the film, and especially a lot of the info dump brought given to our characters by means of the notes of what was his name? I know it was
Goro
a Jap
Maki?
Goromaki. Yes, it was the name used before in Son of Godzilla and Godzilla 84.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's intentional, but
I
considering
don't
how
know
we've
if it
had
is
two
either.
characters, and considering how we've had two characters with that name, it felt like it was an intentional reference, especially given Goromaki's connection to Odo to the monster and Odo Island. Odo Island, that had to be the fact that it even got its name from an old legend. That's definitely a callback to 54
Well, I
and
found that
many
interesting that they spelt it different. Did
uh,
you notice that?
Odo Island.
Yeah, well, the subtitles, I don't know if you probably didn't notice it because it was the subtitles, but the
Mhm.
subtitles spell the name differently between the 54 cut and this cut. I don't, I found that kind of weird. Like, you'd think that
Why?
they,
Because wait, so what's the difference between the spelling here?
I I can't quite remember. So,
Because if it's OHDO Island, if it's OHDO, or if it's like, or if they change it from like OHDO to ODO,
I think it's
I'm
ODO.
ODO. And what was it before?
I think it was OHDO.
Okay, I think that can pretty much be explained because probably that's more of a direct translation from the Japanese name because in the OH seems to imply that it's an extended O sound, and in Japanese when you're switching from like Japanese to English, or rather Japanese writing to English writing, um they don't normally put OH. It's usually like O with like a dash over the O to show that it's an elongated O. Only here in the subtitles, it looks like if it was ODO, they forgot to or they didn't bother to put the dash over the O or put an H in front of the O to signify that it's an elongated O sound.
Yeah.
So it's just,
I
I
just
guess it's
noticed
just a
that when
matter of
watching the
it,
movie.
yeah. So it's just a matter of translating from Japanese to English. Because like there's different ways, like for Japanese they have several ways of elongating certain vowels that you can't really do, yeah, that you would have to find a whole different means of doing when you're putting it in English alphabet writing or Roman lettering, whatever you
Yeah.
call it. I'm just calling it romaji. Like in Japan, the English text is referred to as romaji, and everything that else is in Japanese, it's either kanji, katakana, or hiragana. So for me, I'm just used to calling all English writing as romaji, but I know nobody outside of Japan will know what that means. So I have to just say English writing alphabets, that thing, ABCs.
So in Japan, because you're a teacher, so do you teach English or do they have their own word for it?
Word for what?
For English.
Oh yes, it's called ego. Go. There are so many goals. There are so many goals. There are so many goes in Japanese. Like almost like every single syllable has like a million different kanjis behind it. There's a million words that are go. There's a lot of ki that have different meanings. There's a lot of mo that have different meanings. But this particular go means language. Ego means English language. Like Español, that's Spanish. Nihongo, Nihon language. Nihon is the Japanese name for Japan. Let's see. Is there anything else that I would know of Chinese language? I forgot what they call China, but basically they just like Furansgo, that's French. So basically they take like I don't know where ego comes from, where maybe the comes from English, but most languages they just take the Japanese name of the country and put go at the end of it. So yeah, English The name for English in Japan in Japanese is ego.
Hmm.
So I am an English teacher or ego no sensei.
I did not know that. I'm learning a whole bunch today.
There's useless facts from KaijuNoir.
Yeah, I would have just figured it'd be English like it is. Like I'm in German, and I know in German they just refer to it English. So
Or here's another fun fact. Germany is referred to as Deutsche in
Deutsch.
Japan. Deutsche. They just called it, yeah, they just named it after the German name for German.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess like the German language would be referred to as Deutschgo, I think.
Huh.
Deutschgo.
Yeah, German's got like Germany. They have like a really kind of a long drawn out name for it, and I don't
Hmm.
remember what that is. But then they also have just
Deutschland?
like Deutsch. Well, they have that, but then they have a long
Okay.
version,
Mhm.
and we never use it in class. The teacher says it's rarely used nowadays, only in like
Mhm.
kind of formalities or if you want to be showing off more of your knowledge. And so us in
Mhm.
America, we're not ever going to need to know it, so we don't ever use it. Like they also
We we ain't learned that on American shit.
so they have like Amerikane in German, but then
Uh-huh.
they also have like a super long drawn out name for like it means like states that are united called America or something like that, which is a really long drawn out name, and so we never use it. But yeah, I found that
Mm.
interesting. I didn't know if more countries changed the name.
Yeah, it seems like every language has their own versions of what the names of other countries are.
Yeah.
Like Japan, as I just mentioned, we call it Japan, but the people here call it Nihon or Nippon.
Why the difference?
I've actually asked my students that question, and even they don't know. The thing is, like, they don't really a lot of. I think it's a Japanese mentality sort of thing where they don't bother questioning why things are the way that they are. They just accept that they just accept things the way that they are.
Sounds like probably a better mentality than we have here, but
Maybe it's us that's the problem. Maybe
probably.
we overcomplicate things too much for us by questioning everything.
Yeah. Me questioning why is there Odo with an H and a non an H, and I'm sure they
And
wouldn't have
meanwhile, the
cared.
Japanese they just put their finger to your lip like shh.
You're being disrespectful. No talking during the movie.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I did find this downtime to be kind of kind of cool though because it showed. I wish they'd focused more on it, but they only briefly touched up on it. But they showed a really real world comparison here when there was
Mm-hmm.
a riot that started, a big huge protest that blocked off. They protested outside of the building
Hmm.
that our main characters were in, trying to get them to save Godzilla instead of hurt him. Really real world protests going on. Like it, or if you look at like modern day, people protest and riot about so much nowadays that I found that to be almost like too real to be kind of funny. Like I didn't like I saw it and instead of being like, oh yeah, I can connect to that, I was like, oh, I can connect to that. Like
Hmm.
it was too real. Like, and that's one thing I think the movie does really well. It is a real world movie, and I thought that was really good.
People are rioting up and down the streets of Japan with signs saying "Not my prime minister."
Yeah, I would have loved to see like I think it would be really cool if they were to put out, and I know this would never happen, but if instead
Hmm.
of if they were like, oh, we're not going to do a sequel, which they are, but if they were like, we're not going to do a sequel, I think it would be awesome if they put out the same movie told from the normal citizen perspective. Like, what if we get a citizen who is affected by Godzilla deeply. I think it would be really cool to see the other half of the story here, but there's no way in a million years that they do it. I just think that would be a really awesome movie.
Hmm. Hmm. Or at least deal with the aftermath, and
Hmm.
probably show like the citizens reacting to the poor choices made by the government, which was what also happened in real life.
Yeah. Um. So What do you think? So there was a lot of comedy in this
Mm.
downtime. What do you think about the comedy? Did you think it was out of place? Did it work for you? What do you think about it?
I feel like it did felt appropriate. It did feel like it kind of felt a bit like a workplace, it felt natural for this sort of workplace environment where you have these people spending so much time with each other that they have these brief moments of what would you call it? Brief moments of like the calm before the storm,
Mm-hmm.
moments where they're allowed to relax, maybe be a little bit more personal with one another, maybe drop the formalities a bit, and maybe be a bit more blunt with each other.
Maybe
It's kind of
say
like
your
a bit
prime
of
minister doesn't have enough balls, this kind of thing.
yeah, it's and it's one of those things where it's like they really use a lot of dry humor, and I really enjoyed
Mm-hmm.
that. It's not over the top funny. It's not the over the top type of comedy that you would see a lot in Japanese media. It's not a lot of physical comedy. It's not a lot of over the top, crazy, loud comedy. It's like I said, it's workplace environment. It's a workplace environment type of comedy. People kind of throwing a bit of like snarky attitudes, or maybe a bit of like offbeat comment here or there. And I did enjoy that a lot, and it helped break up the tension. It
Oh
helped give
yeah.
us like something to latch onto, some bit of glimpses of humanity, some glimpses into what these people are like outside of their professional jobs.
Yeah, and moments that stick out of comedy would be you get the two-parter where you start and one of our characters tells the other one that there's no way that the nuclear radiation has any connection to the monster that came on land. That's not possible. And then within like two scenes later, we get back to the other half of that conversation where they find out that the radiation tracks the exact path that the monster came on land with, and the guy when he finds out, he freaks
Hmm.
out on his laptop, runs around to show everyone, then apologize. I thought that was that was pretty
Yeah.
funny.
You're like, oh my God, what does it mean? It means it's connected, you dumbass.
And
Oh,
then they have
okay.
they have the
Sorry.
scene towards the end. They have the scene towards the end of this downtime where
Hmm.
everyone wakes up and they have to tell Rando basically that his shirt smells. He needs to go
Yeah.
change. I thought that was a really funny one because they didn't, like you said, they didn't overplay. I feel like if that was, here's what I said in my review was the comedy was good comedy, not forced, and I feel like a lot of Marvel movies have very forced comedy a lot of the time. Like, not that all the comedy is not funny, I think a lot of it is, but they
Hmm.
definitely take some of it too far. And I feel like, had that been a Marvel movie, they would have been more kind of crazier with the same
Quippy.
joke. Yeah, they would have been more quippy, kind of make it more of a big deal that his shirt stank or something. But
Hmm.
instead, this one was just like, a shower would do you well. Please change your shirt. And then the next scene we cut to, he's got a new shirt on his
Yeah.
desk.
He's like,
So,
please, for the love of God, put this shirt on.
so I just thought like the humor was there and it wasn't in your face to the point where it didn't feel like that this would actually be happening in the real world. Because there's always people are always going to find the comedy and the humor in the situation. That's just human nature. So
Hmm.
I just found that I like that. I thought it made it very more relatable and more real world. So I
Hmm.
really like that.
Hmm.
Now into my probably favorite portion of the movie, and I know it goes against most people's favorite portion of the movie, but my favorite portion of the movie is the fourth form comes on land. We get the King Kong vs. Godzilla theme, and he walks through. He's just massive, and everyone's freaking out because they did not expect him to get this big.
Hmm.
This is the form we see in the trailers. He goes through a small little portion of area before the Terror of Mechagodzilla theme comes on, and that is where it gets really, really cool because we see far shots of him destroying a factory. We see close shots of almost from like we were in a car driving under him as he steps on a house, and we see his tail go over us. There's a scene when you see a whole bunch of citizens on the street watching the tail swoop over them. just amazing, amazing visuals here. And Godzilla is it is so cool to hear, especially the Terror of Mechagodzilla theme play, because that's one of my favorite themes. So I just thought it was an amazing sequence, this whole landing scene, all the way up until he makes landfall, goes on this big, huge path of destruction up until he hits that first city that he gets to. And what are your thoughts on his landing?
I, it's kind of difficult because it's like I feel like it felt like a very impactful moment. Like you mentioned, a lot of the music cues were spot on. This is where like a lot of the special effects from beforehand with the first two on-screen forms, they were very shaky, shaky at best, painful to watch at worst. But this is where it's like, okay, here's the real deal. This is what you've all been waiting for. This is him. This is the big man himself in all his charred up, disturbing, bony, bloody glory. And yeah, I feel like the special effects are top notch here. A lot of the camera work, a lot of the CGI and live action integration is spot on. This is where it's like, yeah, feels like a proper introduction to the big thing, the big selling point that you were making with audiences.
Yeah.
And you feel like, okay, and seeing like the audience's reactions, it feels like, okay, yeah, shit's about. If you thought, that's what I like about the use of the first two forms. They make it look like, okay, shit has hit the fan. But then here's this third form saying, oh no, if you thought shit would hit the fan, wait until you check this out. It's like, if you thought things were bad, it's about to get worse now. Here comes hell.
Yes, and like you mentioned, I think that the special effects budget went to his landing here up until he falls asleep in Tokyo. He doesn't really fall asleep, but up until he goes into shutdown in Tokyo, that whole portion, I think that is where the special effects money went to, because it looks gorgeous. Yes, the shot where he is in the water coming on land is a little bit kind of shaky, but the rest of it, from the minute he steps on land all the way up until that point way later, is really gorgeous. And I think this is, like I said, this is my favorite portion of the movie, is his landing, because not only was that the scene of the movie that surprisingly got the biggest audience reaction in my theater, which made it if audience reaction really helps a movie, in my opinion, it kind of helps you enjoy it because other people are enjoying it. So this scene was just amplified by that and the music, and I thought it was so cool. And I mean, I've watched it so many times because, like, I have the fan cut and I've watched it so many times, and then I had the honor of seeing it in theaters 4 times, so it was really, really cool to see every time. And what about Godzilla's design? I want to hear your thoughts on this.
From the very get-go, when I first talked about Godzilla's design, the reveal of Godzilla design on the Sons of Serizawa podcast, I was wholly on board with it. Overall, I really love the design. It was funny enough, like, this all went back to when Bill and I were, Bill was way back in, I want to say 2015, where Bill, he was visiting me in San Diego, and he and we were invited by Chris Mallory to take a tour of IDW, of the old IDW, what would you call it? IDW headquarters or HQ, or like little studio they had there. And we were just talking a bit about Godzilla in general with Chris Mallory, and he mentioned to us that from what he's heard, from what he's seen, he wasn't allowed to tell us at the time, but from what he saw of the early works of 2016, that Godzilla was going to be a very different looking Godzilla. And since then, my mind always went to, okay, well, what's the most different Godzilla we can possibly get? And for whatever reason, my mind immediately went towards zombie Godzilla. We're gonna get a very disturbing looking corpse of a monster. And funny enough, it's what we ended up getting was something very similar to what I had originally envisioned in my head way back when. And so I was kind of like mentally preparing myself to get used to the idea of a very disturbing looking Godzilla. And the more I thought about it, the more I liked that idea. And so, again, it's a very new take. It's a very different take. It's a very before a lot of Godzillas in the past have still had a very natural look to their designs, even to the point where 2014 Godzilla is a natural creature as opposed to a mutation of any kind. And it's what I like about like a lot of this movie. The thing I enjoy about this design is that it still pays respect to the original 54 design. To paraphrase what Bill said in that episode of the SOS, they went back to the drawing board. They went back to the original concept behind 54 Godzilla and simply emphasized one of its aspects about it. Because over the years we've seen more Godzillas. They kind of drop certain aspects while emphasizing others. Here they went back to the drawing board, picked up one characteristic that was kind of dropped in the past, and bring it about in a new way. And so I like it. It's very, like I said, it's a perfect reflection. The design itself is a perfect reflection of the movie itself, where it's new, it's different, yet still familiar, still pays respect, homaging things that came before, and giving a fresh facelift to an old character.
And you guys are what sold me on this design. Originally, I was I was one of those people who was put off by the little beady eye, and at the same time, I thought the crooked teeth and the way he almost has a smile was
Hmm.
kind of lame. But I listened to you guys talk about it, and I heard you guys talk about this looks a lot like the puppets we saw in 54. This looks
Hmm.
like a lot of the concept art, and it
Hmm.
really sold me on the idea of this is just this is what I feel had they had the ability the 54 makers would have made, because they wanted an abomination. They wanted something that was not supposed to look like the way it looked. It was deformed by the nuclear bomb. And so you guys really helped sell me on the idea that this Godzilla, although it's different, it
Hmm.
still is Godzilla, and this design from there has wound up becoming one of my favorite designs of Godzilla. I think it is just really, really cool. And I think it is almost cooler to know that he is not all charred up. He's not like charred up. He's not ripped apart
Hmm.
because of weakness. He is ripped apart because he is evolving. Instead of
Hmm.
he's been hurt, this is because he's grown so much that he just hasn't grown the right amount of skin yet. He is just
Hmm.
not to that point yet. So instead of weakness, it actually shows strength. And I thought that was a really cool way of doing it. And the design overall, I thought was awesome. Everyone hated the little arms. I thought the arms were pretty cool, and I love the way they're upturned. Like, I don't know why.
Hmm.
I think it's pretty cool the way he holds them up.
Hmm.
Everything down to the massive tail, which is about twice as long as his body length. I even think
Hmm.
that's really cool. Like I've said it before, if you're going to exaggerate the tail, why not go all out with it? And they definitely
Yeah.
did. It is super sweet, and it pays off at the final act of the movie. So I just think it was an awesome choice.
Hmm.
Um, So from here, do you know what the city was? I forgot to write this down. The first city he attacks, which they said was like the gateway to Tokyo.
Unfortunately, I did not.
Okay, well, everyone knows what this is. They showed it off in the trailers. All the
Hmm.
promotional material had at least something to do with this scene. A really cool sequence where Godzilla enters this city, and they start with a helicopter assault. He starts walking through the city. He doesn't destroy anything, which I kind of found interesting. He doesn't like intentionally go after buildings. He just
Hmm.
walks in a straight path, not caring about anything.
Hmm.
The helicopters don't work, so they switch to a tank brigade where I think they said they had like Type 10 tanks, which are some pretty old school kind of tanks. Usually we see like Abrams today, but instead they were Type 10, so they were old school. Um, they did a tank assault on him, and then they switched to a jet assault on him. They blow him up a ton right when it seems like it worked. A bridge flies up out of the smoke, lands in a river, and falls onto land, crushing some tanks. Godzilla continues his path, makes it into the heart of Tokyo. There's a huge panic. Everyone, the prime minister, all the other ministers are evacuating. Rando and some of our main crew decide to take a car instead of a helicopter. Uh, Godzilla makes his way into Tokyo. The Americans come in to bomb him. They actually do some damage. They hit him in the back of the neck with a bunker bomber, and it winds up making him bleed all over the city, which winds up angering him. So he starts glowing purple. Rando and crew evacuate into. It's almost like an underground place. I couldn't quite tell where it was, but it's like an underground place from what I could tell.
Mm-hmm.
There's this purple glow in the city, and then Godzilla's mouth opens up, but instead of just opening, it stretches apart like a snake, and then the bottom jaw clips in half, and out comes this black mist that pours through the city, and then Godzilla ignites it into fire, and everything goes up in an explosion. Then the fire turns into this purple beam. The purple beam is almost a Gauss laser with just how precise it is. He blows up a stealth bomber with it, and then cuts the city in half.
Mm-hmm. I also love how it's almost like a hot knife, like slicing through butter.
It's just so cool, and then the way it's like if you see a flamethrower, the flame doesn't start at the end of the flamethrower. It starts a bit a bit further. And this Godzilla, instead of just the atomic breath coming directly from the throat, it starts like outside of his mouth, and it's because it's so hot you can't see it. And then he demolishes the city. Some more bunker bombs are dropped on him. Before they can hit him, he unleashes a back blast, which is just a massive amount of lasers, whatever they would be called, just shoot up from his back. I don't know if they have like heat sensing or anything because they don't make it clear, but they were able to not only blow up all the bunker bombs, but they blow up all the stealth bombers, and then Godzilla continues to shoot the red fire breath and eventually goes into shutdown so his body can cool down and regenerate enough radiation so he can get back on the move. What are your thoughts on all this?
Simply astounding. It's beautiful, it's horrifying, it's spectacular. It's so much. It's all of that and more. This is definitely worth the price of admission.
Mm-hmm.
Or now that it's no longer in theaters, this is worth owning. This is worth buying. This is worth watching just for this sequence alone. This is when people first the people who were in support of Toho's decision to bring on Hideaki Anno as the director of Shin Godzilla. This is pretty much like the kind of things they were the kind of stuff that they were envisioning, I bet. You've got the amazing song. What was it? It was
Who Will Know Tragedy?
Thank you very much. Who Will Know Tragedy playing in the background. You have the everyone huddling in fear. You've got multiple districts of Tokyo on fire. You've had forces, the Japanese and American forces being blown to smithereens, and of course it's Godzilla being Godzilla. He is the abomination. He is the personification of death incarnate. He is there to put humans back in their place, to make sure that they fucked up by messing with him in the first place. It's like any mistake that humanity makes, it's like Godzilla's there to remind them of their place in this world. It's all, like I said, it's all of that and more. And I don't think even after everything I've said, and even after everything that's been said throughout across the universe, across the internet, I feel like this is one of those sequences where it's like words cannot really explain how good this sequence is. You just have to see it to believe it.
Yeah, I I will stand by the opinion. This is the most, I want to say, almost like the biggest spectacle, the most like spectacular scene of any Godzilla movie ever. Just this huge reveal, and he does it. I think it's really cool. He does it as a defense mechanism. This huge reveal, amazing scene. The music amplifies it. Just this is one of those scenes where every aspect of it worked. You have people being confused what's happening, you have the action, you have the loss of a massive amount of characters because the atomic breath sweeps through a building and hits the helicopter, which has most of, I think they said like 9 ministers, including the prime minister in. And so just a ton of people are killed here. Just a amazing scene, and it's really, really just, it's awesome to see. And sadly, this is one of those scenes that wound up being leaked first, so I wound up seeing this before the movie. But either way, it was still worth it. I would say it was still worth it to see the movie just for that scene, even already seeing it, because just on the big screen was so grand and was just so amazing. I loved it so much. Uh, I don't know. This was most people's favorite scene of the movie, and like I said, the only reason I liked his landing better was because it was much more classic. Almost came directly, like you could picture that as a scene from a Showa movie. So that's the only reason I like that one more. But this one, I would say, is better of a scene. I just didn't like it more.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so now, after this amazing atomic breath sequence, Godzilla goes into shutdown, like I said. Now we have a lot of downtime. This is almost an hour of downtime of people trying to figure out what to do after what just happened. And lots of ideas are tossed back and forth. They tried this originally called the Yaguchi operation. They later give it the name. How do you say it? It's like your Sharo or something like that.
Let's see. How do you can you spell it out for me in Skype?
I don't know what it's called. I'll have to look it up. It's yeah, I don't know, but it was their deep
Was it
freeze
something?
plan.
Was it something like Yasuhiro or
Yeah,
something?
something like that.
Maybe.
It was something like that, and it was their plan to. They were going to pump a coagulant into Godzilla's body in order to freeze his blood. That way, his body wouldn't be able to. Because the way his blood worked was his blood cooled down his body after
So
events like the atomic breath or anything like that.
that's the thing I don't understand. If the blood cools the if the blood cools his sort of like internal organic reactor, then would freezing coagulating the blood means like stopping the flow of blood. It is essentially like hardening it, turning into a solid.
Hmm.
So without the blood there to cool it, how does he freeze? That's the thing I don't understand about this movie. It's like it does a rather poor job of explaining what's the science behind it. It's like Michael Crichton. He is not.
What
I mean,
I got
what I
from it was
what
like,
sorry, what I meant to say is I was referring to Ano as a writer.
yeah, what I got from it was so the blood cools his body that
Yes.
way because his body obviously heats up too much for him to handle. So his
Yeah.
blood was a cooling agent. So if
Yeah.
they pumped more cooling agent into him, which they called a coagulant,
Hmm.
if they amplified how much it cooled him down, it would
Hmm.
continue to do its job, but now be even more amplified, which would, instead of just helping his body, just in turn freeze it entirely, so the blood would continue to cool down, but at the same time, his body was cooling down, so it was they were both working together to freeze him entirely.
Hmm.
That's the way I saw it. So they were like exploiting his natural I don't know what you would call that, a defense. They were exploiting it so that instead of helping him, it would wind up hurting him. I didn't really get
Okay.
the sense that they were trying to freeze the blood from moving, but more of they
Hmm.
were trying to, because that would overheat him. But
Right, right. But the thing is, they keep calling it a coagulant, and that's
yeah,
what coagulants do.
I
It's
think I
stop.
think the only reason they called it that was because his body would freeze, not the blood. But I don't know. Yeah, like you said, they didn't explain it the way they should have.
Yeah. Yeah,
But
that's another thing. It's the pacing and the exposition and the scientific exposition. Those are the biggest weaknesses for this film.
yeah, like they do not explain at all how it's possible that these cells could mutate the way they do. They just, this happened, accept it, let's move on. So,
Like there it is. Fuck you. Don't ask questions.
but yeah, like you said, it's just us Americans. Apparently, the Japanese are just going to take that and roll with it, and we're going to be the ones to question it.
It's
So
like
there you
we
go.
already have a movie with a giant fucking dinosaur here. Okay, do you really need to question anything else?
Yeah,
We had a dinosaur that evolved from a tadpole. Okay,
yeah. I really don't think they thought
like just
people would care as much as they do, but
they like just bring out Bane. It's like now's not the time for questions. That comes later.
yeah. Uh, so so we get, like I said, an hour of downtime. Although I found this to be really interesting stuff going on with everyone trying to figure out like how to actually stop this, and then the US shows up, and I love the way instead of the US being like, all right, we'll help you because your plan's going to work, instead of that right off the bat, the US is just like, you know what, let's just drop a thermonuclear bomb on there, that'll solve it pretty fast. um, so I found that to kind of be funny, just once again throwing it in our face, what we did at the end of World War II. But so the Americans are planning to nuke Godzilla, so the Japanese are put into like super rush mode where they try to, all right, we got to figure out this coagulant as soon as we can, otherwise Tokyo's gone. Um, but I'm still confused. I don't know if you caught this. There's a point in the movie when they specifically say the the coagulant won't work inside his body. That kills the Iguchi operation before they name it the final name. They say that kills the Iguchi operation. Now we got to figure out something else to do. And then I don't remember how they explain. Okay, never mind. It will work. Do you know?
I think the problem that they had was they were trying to understand in order to make a coagulant that could work, they need to understand how his blood works. And so that a lot of that downtime was spent attempting to research how the bloody blood works. Um, and it's all that at that point they were trying to understand Goromaki's notes, and that's when we got the whole origami deal, which I know that's
Yeah,
another
what
thing
a
I still
cryptic
don't
jerk right
understand.
there. Like, who does that?
He's like, I don't know, it's your problem now. I'm done with this miserable plan. I'm done with this miserable existence. You guys suck. Goodbye.
So there's a fan theory online. I want to get your thoughts on this. I believe it. There's a fan theory online. Goromaki, it's made very clear he does not like Japan because they turned their back on his wife. He hates nuclear material and anyone involved with it. They say that straight up. Now, right after that is said, right after they say, so this happens, he kills himself knowing that this monster is going to show up on land.
So
The
he leaves a
minute
series of breadcrumbs
Yeah,
for humanity to follow.
the minute they say this, it immediately cuts to a scene of the tip of Godzilla's tail cracking in half. Now,
Yeah.
I drew the connection along with many other people. What happened was Goro killed himself, was absorbed by whatever was under the ocean, mutating what was already mutated into Godzilla, using his hatred for Japan to push Godzilla, like to influence him onto land, and which is
They do
also
make they
comes,
make it a they Sorry,
yeah,
go ahead.
well, I was gonna say it also comes full circle at the very last scene of the movie with humanoids being on the tail. Why is there human DNA in Godzilla that's going to evolve? Because Goro's already absorbed by Godzilla. That was the connection that me and many people drew from it.
Hmm. And they do make it a point in the movie where there are characters who are questioning what Godzilla's motives are. And if they want to keep it an ongoing mystery, it would make for a really great reveal in a possible sequel. It was revealed why Godzilla attacks humanity, and if he was somehow encouraged by Goro to attack Japan. But then again, if he wants to attack Japan, does he leave notes to help Japan?
I think they did that because remember at the end of the movie, after Godzilla's already dealt with, or it might be right before they finally deal with him. I can't remember when it happens, but Rando and Kyoko are standing on top of a rooftop talking to each other, and Rando makes sure to say, Goro left the notes, do as you like. This means the inclusion of nuclear weapons. He thought this would happen. So he thought that they were going to nuke Godzilla, and he hated nuclear material. He hated Japan, so he was going to release nuclear material on Japan. So that might be.
Mm. Yeah, that is kind of an interesting theory, although I think maybe it's possible that it could be possible. I do agree that maybe that he might have some his suicide may have something to do with why Godzilla has those humanoid offsprings at the end of the movie, and why Godzilla himself has a very humanoid body, a humanoid form.
Mm-hmm.
Outside of that, I don't know. I don't really like the idea of like Godzilla's motivations being Goro's motivations, because I always thought Godzilla he's something more than that. It kind of like for Godzilla to be motivated by petty act of revenge doesn't really feel very Godzilla-esque. If in fact it feels more like Titanosaurus, if anything.
I was kind of thinking the same thing, but
Godzilla. I feel like Godzilla's actions should be like that of like an act of a vengeful god, not by an act of a god of an angry scientist who's like, "Yeah, my wife is dead. Fuck you all." Yeah.
But isn't
It's like kind of ruins Godzilla. It kind of ruins Godzilla's character if he's being motivated by that guy. By that type of person.
I think to some degree, but isn't it kind of like the same thing you could draw where you say, well, they haven't no one's officially said this, but where if you kind of look at the clues, it's somewhat implied Godzilla in the 54 movie hates humanity because he was deformed by the nuclear bomb. Therefore, he is attacking the closest land because of that. So wouldn't it kind of be similar? It's still a revenge story. It is still nuclear bomb, nuclear whatever related. So to some degree, it's the same.
As long as Godzilla acts somewhat on his own accord, like 54. With 54, he's acting on his own.
Yeah,
and that's what I like. So if they are able to do some of that with Godzilla's motivations, I'd be okay with it. So as long as he has a will of his own, he's not abiding by anyone else.
So if it was like Goro jumps in, gets absorbed by whatever it is down there. Now he basically pushes Godzilla. He influences to go on land, and then he doesn't influence him to do anything else. So Godzilla, once he's on land, or everything else is his own choice.
He helps give Godzilla a picture of who's responsible for his mutation.
Yeah, that might be interesting too. Which now we're just getting into sequel theories, and I strongly believe there's a sequel.
Yeah, but who knows what's going to happen with the sequel?
That's
At this point, you can go anywhere from here.
Yeah, that is very, very true. And the fact that they said that, or I believe it was Hideaki Anno said, I'm not coming back for the sequel. He said that, so...
Didn't he say that he doubts he'll be back for the sequel?
He said he was very contradictory when he said it, because he says, he said, I don't believe I'm coming back for the sequel. It's not my place to decide. It's Toho's decision who makes the sequel. I don't want to be in charge of the sequel because it's more interesting if someone else takes the mantle. So not only did he say it's Toho's fault, but then he said it's my fault. So he kind of contradicted himself, saying it's two different people's faults. So
maybe it's like, I'm not the one that makes decisions, but personally I don't want to be a part of it.
Yeah. It might be something like that, which
it's not my final call to make.
Yeah, I don't get why he wouldn't want to come back. He did a great job with this.
Maybe he found it as a way of like escapist fantasy. It's like, you know what, doing Evangelion has made me depressed as shit again. So this was my way to get some stuff off my chest. Now I'm ready to go back into Evangelion, finish wrapping up Evangelion.
Let's just hope he finishes Evangelion and then comes back and does the sequel.
Or maybe do that even Godzilla versus Evangelion thing. Make that
Uh,
make all the cross promotion material actually worth it.
yeah, that would make so many people. You just know there'd be like a fandom war there of people like supporting each one. Like, no, don't care who wins in the movie. This one would win, like that kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah. It's
Like you
it's
would
it's
see that if
Tokusatsu
like
versus anime.
yeah,
War of the Weeaboos.
you would see the same thing if Godzilla and Gamera fought. People would be on either side. Like, I don't care who the movie says wins. Gamera's gonna win. Like, there would be people doing that, and there would be people be like,
It's
Godzilla.
Jacob and Edwards all over again.
Exactly. Yeah, but I hope he comes back for the sequel. I don't think anyone can handle this universe the way he does. And um, now, moving on to my biggest problem with the movie, when they explain what Godzilla is most likely going to turn into, I really have a problem with this. So, during all this downtime, it's explained by the Americans this creature, what they find a dorsal plate that's been knocked off, and they scan it and find out that it's turning into, I believe they say he is going to mutate into, there's going to be mutations of a smaller Godzilla, but then they also say there's a Godzilla that can sprout wings capable of international flight, which is what makes them decide to nuke. They're
I
like,
think
okay, we gotta nuke it.
I think it's meant to be a throwaway line saying like this thing can evolve into anything at this point.
I
This thing
just
has the possibility of evolving into anything, and that the wings was just a throwaway line to just show one extreme, like the most extreme possibility. I didn't really give too much thought to that. To
I
that.
yeah, I don't know. I did because my first thought was, well, that's really cool because if he evolves into multiple creatures, this could be like a new explanation for Rodan, Ghidorah, probably. Like that sounds like it
Hmm.
could be Varan even because if you think about it, Varan and Godzilla have a similar look, but at
Hmm.
the same time, I was worried because if they were willing to make it a point that Godzilla can evolve to these extremes,
Hmm.
and we've already seen the kind of extremes that he evolved to in this movie, I really worry if there's a sequel, they're going to
Hmm.
further push Godzilla's characterization away from what it used to be into something that's mostly unrecognizable. And I know they probably won't do that, but there's still the possibility, which is why I still am worried for if there's a sequel.
Hmm. I have a feeling that maybe what they'll most likely do is that for the sequel they'll try to have Godzilla mutate into a more familiar design, perhaps, because now that they've gauged, they're probably going to gauge the reaction from the from Shin Godzilla and maybe make a judgment on that to make it maybe more traditional and less experimental.
Yeah, I hope. I mean, I've talked about it before. I think the coolest thing that they could do for a sequel is one of two things. Have the I don't know what you'd call them. The things on the end of his tail, have those be, they like sprout off his tail. They're
Hmm.
going to defend Godzilla up until he can, break out of this coagulant, up until his body can, maybe the blood
So
evolves to the point
it's
where it
like a
can heat
modern day
up.
Attack on Titan.
Yeah, well, I was just thinking, like, maybe the things on his tail wind up being, like, defensive mechanisms where they sprout off the tail, defend
Hmm.
the big guy up until he's able to move again,
Hmm.
and who knows what happens to them after that point. But,
Yeah. Or rather,
or,
it's a reverse situation where instead of Godzilla instead of a bunch of humans attempting to protect their big country, it's a bunch of it's still you have having a bunch of organisms sprouting from their literal birthplace.
mm-hmm. Or, like, my other idea would be, who knows where they go with this humanoid tail storyline. The big
Hmm.
thing is, one of them or something some like maybe Godzilla's blood scrapes off on something, evolves into another Godzilla, so we can finally have what if two Godzillas fought, and maybe we could have a
Two
more
Godzillas. What does this mean?
yeah, maybe we could have a more traditional Godzilla versus the Shin Gojira, or who knows how it would happen. I just think that would be an awesome idea.
Uh-huh.
But really, they could go anywhere with the sequel, and it is really hard to tell what they will do. I strongly believe this will get a sequel. Not only did it make a ton of money, not only internationally, but especially in Japan,
Yeah.
um, it is very, very praised. The actors have said in interviews that some of them are willing to come back, and the last line of the movie is "Things are far from over." So there is definitely a lot of setup for a sequel. It is going to be extremely disappointing if they don't follow through.
But as is, I feel like it still works as a one and done
Oh yeah, it's
project.
a standalone story,
Mm-hmm.
but
And I do like it. I do like it. It leaves a very ambiguous open
mhm,
ending that I feel like is very impactful. Where Rondo basically says, we have to learn because like there's no way to kill Godzilla, so that we have to learn how to live with him. Are partially responsible for this thing, and now we have to own up to our mistakes and learn to deal with the repercussions of our own actions. In a way, it's kind of mimicking what's happening in real life. I even like what one reviewer mentioned. I think it was Gaijin Goomba who made it in his review, where he mentioned how he theorized that that line may have been a representation of Japan's reliance on nuclear energy, where given how dangerous nuclear energy is, they still need to rely on it as their main source of energy that they import. It's basically the main source of energy that they rely on because using oil as a main fuel source would mean having to spend more money than they are doing, more money than they can actually afford. So it's
that's a
like,
good, yeah, that's a good connection. I didn't think about that.
yeah, where Godzilla himself, the fact that he may or may not go into meltdown, that's a big. I think even Adam made that comparison on this channel where he made the connections between Godzilla and Fukushima, and so yeah, Godzilla is something you can never really get rid of, just like how you can't get rid of nuclear energy for Japan, and you just have to learn. You have to find some way to like some sort of moderation, some way of like being absolutely careful and not repeating the same mistakes as you made beforehand.
Yeah. So now let's wrap up the movie with a really cool sequence where I believe the CG was definitely not as impressive as it was previously.
Hmm.
It kind of drops down to the quality of the first act of the movie, but
Hmm.
um, they wake Godzilla up by blowing him up with some trains.
Hmm.
He wakes up. They have American drones fly in, start bombing him, trying to deplete his nuclear energy. He takes the bait, shoots out the back lasers. As they continue to bomb him, he doesn't have enough energy to support that. He switches to the infamous tail laser, and then has the atomic breath running at the same time. And then eventually he winds up completely depleting nuclear energy. They blow him up, I believe, knock him down, and then they have some trucks roll up, start putting. Oh yeah, they have buildings blow up, and the buildings fall on him, knocking him down. Then they
Hmm.
have trucks roll up, start pumping him full of the coagulant. Um, Before it can work, he shoots out one beam of atomic breath, stands up. They have more trains blow up, which, for whatever reason, the trains run all the way up his body when they blow up. And then
Let's
he's,
figure out how that works,
yeah.
physicists
Once
who
again,
may or
this
may not be
movie,
listening.
yeah, once again, this movie just flipping off anyone who cares about the science. So Godzilla's knocked down. They have the final trucks pump coagulant into him. Right as it looks like it's about to work, he stands up, biting the trucks off. Continues to walk for I think like two more steps before freezing. He freezes almost instantly. He lets out really cool. Instead of the shower roar, which he's let out the whole movie before this, he lets out the 84 roar, and then he freezes. finally, and now we get some final cleaning up scenes at the end of the movie where, like we've already talked about, Rando makes the line or says the line, "Things are far from over," implying that there is probably still more to come.
It's almost like the exact kind of opposite. It's like the same ending as Final Wars, ironically, but with an opposite tone.
A
It's
little
not
bit.
the end. It's a brand new beginning.
Yeah.
And you have this like horrifying image of the frozen humanoid Godzilla babies, while you have the cheerful music. Da 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 dun 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 dun.
Yeah. I didn't think about that. Um, Sounds like it could be a funny video I could make, but um,
だが今はやめるわけにはいかない。事態の収束にはまだ程遠いからな。
so yeah. What were your thoughts on this whole scene when they were blowing up buildings, trying to knock him down, all the way up
It
until when he freezes?
it felt very Showa-esque,
Yes.
which was definitely what would you say, emphasized by the fact that they were using the very classic, another classic Ifukube theme from Battle in Outer Space, which was used in many other Godzilla films afterwards. And it's very energetic, very a little bit lighthearted in a way, all very patriotic as well. And so it kind of matches the tone of just throwing literally everything at him, everything, everything plus the kitchen sink, because I'm pretty sure there were a couple of kitchen sinks in those buildings that they were throwing on Godzilla.
There would have
So
to
you
be.
could say they literally threw everything and plus the kitchen sink. So it was very fun, very energetic. It was. I wasn't bothered so much as everybody else by the tail laser, because at that point, after seeing everything in the movie, I'm like, okay, whatever, I'm down
Yeah.
for anything at this point. For other
Yeah.
people, it's like, what, Pokemon Godzilla transformations, I can deal with that. Or it's like, back lasers, I can deal with that. Mouth splitting, jaw splitting open, I can deal with that. But the tail laser, no, that's where I draw the line. How dare you do something like that? But no, I can understand it's a matter of personal taste, and for me, I'm down with it. Anything else? Oh, the biggest problem I have is that the freezing sequence, it was just a single shot that lasted like 2 seconds. I thought that the Godzilla freezing felt very anticlimactic. I know that's what they were trying to do, but I feel like the execution was way too short for all the buildup that the climax was creating. I feel like maybe if you had rather than having it be instantaneous, I really wish that it would have been maybe like a full minute-long sequence of Godzilla. Like maybe it starts from his chest, and then this freezing starts to spread all over his body, and so he's desperately trying to move. He's trying to move before he lets one loud roar, and then the face freezes. But instead, it's just one single shot, not even the whole body, just one single close-up of his face, and then it's done like that. And given everything we've seen up until that point, I feel like it. Like I said before, it felt very rushed and anticlimactic. It's like,
Yeah.
wait, what? Huh? Huh? Is that it? What? Huh? What?
It was very just odd how quick it happens. Like, it is instant when he freezes, and like you said, I think it would have been cool had he starts to freeze. He's you can tell he's panicking. Maybe he starts moving those arms finally. He's trying to do something to not, but he winds up freezing. If it was a more, like you said, drawn out extended scene where you can tell he's worried and then he freezes at the end, would have been to much better effect than just he roars and then is done. So I definitely agree there. I think it was a missed opportunity to have a much better ending, but other than that,
A more dramatic ending.
yeah, yeah. Other than that, that whole sequence was really, really great. Like you said, Battle in Outer Space theme really, really helped it. just feel classic and fun. And I was the only person I feel like who kind of made this connection, but I feel like, when they blow up the buildings on him, may have been poking fun at the American Godzilla, the 2014 Godzilla, who gets one building knocked on him and that nearly kills him. Whereas this Godzilla, they blow up four, they all fall on him, and then he immediately gets up afterward and he's good to go. So I thought that was almost like them saying, yeah, our Godzilla's better, deal with it. I could be the only one, but I don't know.
It did reminded me of the 2014 sequence, and so I was thinking maybe this was their way of one-upping that's what happened in that movie.
Yeah. So I don't know, but I thought that was a really, really fun scene, and then we just get the final little thing at the end where Kayoko seems confident she'll become president, and Rando, I cannot tell what happens with Rando. I have managed to miss the subtitles every time. Every time I've seen the movie, like I said, 4 times in theaters, and then every time I watch it, my cut, I always forget to look what he says, because they say something like, I can't tell, does he get kicked off? He says they're going to scrap, they need a whole new administration or something like that. Does Rando get kicked off?
No. He says they need time to rebuild, and so a lot of people are confident that he will help in the rebuilding or the reformation of the Japanese government.
Okay.
Like everyone is seeing like a lot of his supporters, especially the dude with the glasses who hands him the water bottle. He's like the biggest supporter of him, and he's like, "I'll help you get to the top. Just make sure you save a senator seat for me."
Yeah, but then the other guy, the next guy in charge, I don't know how to say his name. It's like Hideaki. He has a last name, but this dude,
I'm pretty sure that's Hideki. His name was Hideki, yeah.
Hideki, okay.
Which I know a lot of people call Hideaki Anno by Hideki Anno, but only because in Hideaki Anno there's an Hideaki, but here it's just simply Hideki.
Yeah, that makes sense. So Hideki, their conversation, where it makes it sound like, it made it seem like they were going to get an entirely new team in charge of the government. And like I said, I don't know how I did it. There's one line that he says I managed to miss every time, and I only catch a glimpse of it, and the thing I watch it on is really hard to pause and go back, so I always wind up missing it. But I always miss what he says, and then we continue on to Rando talking to Kayoko, but now at least it's cleared up. I know that he wasn't kicked off, because that's the way I took it, was that they were explaining to him, everyone's off. They're getting a whole new, everyone's rebuilding.
It kind of felt like more of a hopeful, more optimistic ending.
Yeah.
Saying like, yeah, they're going to start from scratch, but at least he'll be behind it this time around.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, so that was the end of the movie. It was like we talked about. It was an alright ending, kind of anticlimactic, but other than that, I would say that this movie was just absolutely awesome. We already talked about the pacing problems, which, yeah, it has some pacing problems. 30 minutes of downtime.
Even your 2-hour fan cut, it still felt a bit like dragging.
Yeah, like we get 30-minute downtime. Godzilla shows up, followed by a full hour of downtime, which is a ridiculous amount to see only glimpses of Godzilla start to glow red. Just a lot of time, and it comes in the middle of it comes at the second act, just as full human scenes, and that is really jarring compared to the rest of the movie. So,
and the fact that you had a montage, and what do you follow it up with? Some exposition followed by another montage.
Did you get annoyed at that stupid track that they used? Because at first I liked the track.
The Evangelion track? Yeah, because it felt like nothing was happening.
They used it. They had I had the soundtrack. They had 4 to 7 different versions of it. And they, you get one that's just drums. You get a guitar. You get random stuff, and they just overplay it instead of making like new music. Like I think "Persecution of the Masses," that is my favorite song ever. And instead of making more new original music, they just reused this track, and it got really
like
annoying.
that's supposed to be like the planning, the montage planning music, and I get using that like once or twice, but to use it so many times when it doesn't feel like nothing's being accomplished, it kind of it softens the impact of that song, and it makes it feel less awesome when you hear it.
Yeah, and I am not joking when I say we get like a 2-minute montage when that song plays of phone calls being made to get the factories to start working. Like a full extended drawn out scene of a
Like,
dude
just
on the
put
phone
that,
cut to a
just put
girl on
that,
the phone. Like what
just
the
put
heck?
that, just put that in the first montage.
Like yeah, you they didn't
Or
even
I mean,
try.
what I meant to say is put it in the last montage.
Yeah. Yes.
That's what montages are supposed to do.
They're supposed to be long. And the montages only last like anywhere from 30 seconds to 2 minutes, and then we get some like quick exposition talking, another montage, very short, and it's broken up by little talking scenes in between. But
Even in certain montages, in certain Hollywood montages, you have people talking during the montage. You have people doing you like what the South Park song says, not the South Park songs, the songs the Team America song show a lot of things happening at once, reminding everyone of what's going on, and would then like every shot show a little bit of improvement to show that it won't take too long. That's called the montage.
yeah, but I don't know this, and it really stands out to me because when I listen to my music on my iPod, those songs, because they all have the same title followed up with like 1 or 2 or 3 on the soundtrack, play one after another. So I get like a solid block of like 12 minutes of dun. It's so annoying, but other than that, the music was for the most part really good. I do prefer some of the tracks they didn't use. For instance, I do like the "Who Will Know Tragedy" strings version much more than I like the singing version. It has much more of an impact, I think, and would work better with the scene. But for the most part, the music's really good, and the special effects are anywhere from bad to amazing, which is not really a great range that you want to fall in, but still.
But by Japanese standards,
yeah.
it's good.
And to say that this movie had a lot less of a budget than the 2014 film, they did a lot more with the money that they had than the 2014 movie. So, really impressive there. The comedy worked. The action scenes were great. Godzilla's forms, the new powers, was a fresh take on Godzilla, something original, something we rarely ever see anymore with movies. And
because everybody wants to homage the past.
Yeah, like I don't know if you do watch South Park, but what they're doing with the member
yeah,
that is.
Oh, I remember.
Yeah, like. There's so much nostalgia nowadays that no one wants to do anything original, so it was good to see a fresh take on Godzilla. High hopes for the sequel. Great characters, honestly. I think maybe this is because my family comes from politics and therefore I can relate, but I found the characters to be some of the best. Like, really quick to run through. Rando Yaguchi, I know a lot of people say this movie doesn't have a main character. It does. That is our main character.
Oh yeah, definitely. He is like the most relatable guy. He's the guy you spend the most time with. He's the guy who's like the most emotional, the most passionate. He's the guy who, he's kind of like the guy pointing out what we're all thinking. It's like there's so many meetings, there's a lot of talking, but nothing is getting done. And he is he is just as frustrated as the audience is. And, we want to see him, shake things up. We want to see him do something, but unfortunately he's just part of the system, and that's what makes him sympathetic.
Yeah. We have Hideki, who was... he was an alright character. I felt like...
is he a water bottle guy?
No, he's the dude who, after after
Oh,
Rando,
glasses guy, right?
yeah, he's the guy after Rando brings up in the meeting this. I think this is a large marine animal. He's the guy
Uh,
who's like, hey, careful what you
ah,
say. Remember who got you
yeah, yeah,
here.
yeah.
That's
He's
that
the guy
guy.
who's kind of like he's like the guy who kind of represents the old system, while at the same time,
Hmm.
kind of like the closest guy Rando is with, um, who is part of the old system.
Yeah, and I thought he was an okay character. For the most part, there
Yeah.
were points when
He kind of acts as a bit of a mentor character, or at least like a slightly older, experienced character to contrast with
yeah,
Randall. Okay.
and there were points when I kind of didn't like. I didn't love what they were doing with him. Like when instead of because Rana makes a pretty good point. We need to consider all options. This guy just shows up and he's like, "Hey, remember who got you to this position? Keep quiet." Instead of just being like, "Hey, that was a kind of stupid theory. Let's not bring that up again." He kind of like
Uh-huh.
throws it in his face, and
Yeah, yeah. There's
there were
very,
points when I thought
I
he was
think
like, "All right,
maybe,
it's
maybe that's
cool
sort of
down."
that's part of like that. Maybe it's a bit of like a bit of that senpai kohai relationship where it's like
Yeah,
the most experienced guy is allowed to talk shit to the lower person, and you can't do anything because that's the Japanese way. You can't confront the older, more experienced person in your workforce or in school or anything like that.
yeah.
Which is something that we don't have in America, where it's like, yeah,
No, not at all.
I don't care if you're older than me. If I want to tell it to your face, I will say it. As I will say it how I feel.
That
I
is
will say
one
how I
thing.
feel.
That is one thing I love about America.
Well, that's the phrase. Tell it as it is. That's
Tell
the
it
phrase I
as it
was looking
is.
for. Yeah, I'm
Um,
not. We are not afraid to tell it as it is.
no, we are not. So then we get Kayoko and Patterson, who is a very controversial character because a lot of people did not like. They were like, "Oh, she's too kind of." She's very different than the rest of the characters. She's more like upbeat, kind of like the American interpretation that they have. So she's upbeat, like more
You
loud
mean,
spoken.
you mean a Japanese interpretation of an
Yes,
American?
yes,
Okay,
that is what I
love.
meant.
For me, I love that about her.
Yeah, I do too. I think it's funny. Like one of the first things she
It's
says
like
is she.
we have Donald Trump as a president now. We have no excuse to not make our Americans as over the top as possible.
Yeah, I think it was funny. Like there's a scene, and she has a lot of humor with her too. There's a scene when her and Randa were talking about the drones, and she makes sure
Mhm.
to throw it in his face, like, "Oh, we'll build Japan later for any drone damage," like as a joke. And she was a funny character, but a lot of people seem to be upset because I do not understand this complaint
Mhm.
at all. But some of the people that I know have some problems with her being quote unquote over sexualized, which is
What the?
not the case at all. And
You see a lot of Japanese media today
they
in your
they
life.
only get this. They only get this from that first scene with her when she's wearing like she's wearing what she says is like a party uniform or whatever.
Because she just came out from a party, I think.
Yes, she did. She says, "I rushed here straight from a party. I didn't have time to change." A lot of people are just very sensitive. Like, I feel like you had to be PC principal to be upset with this one, but
Triggering members again.
but yeah, I don't know. Just yeah, I thought she was a great character.
I just did not like her English performance.
Oh man.
I mean, shit. Rondo could speak better English than her.
Every character in the movie spoke better English. Who was it? Hideki, I think.
I have students who can speak better English than her.
I think Hideki's the one who has a line on the phone when he says, "Certainly, we will act accordingly that way." President Ross speaks it really well, really fluently. And then there's her, who you had to kind of... I had to read the subtitles the first time I
looked like
saw
she
it.
was trying to talk with her tongue between her teeth,
Yeah,
but slurring every word in her sentences.
and granted, she's not an English speaker,
I will
but...
give her, the one credit I'll give her is that she tried to match the speed of an English speaker.
Yeah.
Because the thing is, a lot of people, Japanese people, they have a really difficult time trying to connect the words together. Everything is very broken. Everything is broken, so they can make sure to pronounce every word as best as possible. while with Americans, we tend to combine our words together to where we would skip certain syllables or shorten certain sounds in order to make it sound as, sound fluent. And so I guess she was trying to combine, kind of try and have that same sort of American speech pattern as opposed to focusing on every syllable. Unfortunately, I don't think it worked, and it just makes it sound like she was slurring a lot.
Yeah, and yeah, I don't, yeah, she kind of has one of those stereotypical Asian accents, whereas I think some of the other characters in the movie would have been a lot better fit as the American in the movie because they did much better job speaking English.
Hmm.
Other than that complaint about her, I thought she was a great character, or fine, or whatever. But one of my favorite characters is the first prime minister in the movie, just because he is. Like I said, my family comes from politics. There is a person we know, not to get specific, a person we know that is one of the higher ups who is a lot like this guy, where you can tell he's a good guy, he is trying to do the right thing. His execution is not not key. It is just not
because
how
he's just he's a product. He's like a product straight from the old system, from the old ways of handling things.
Exactly.
He doesn't know how to adapt to the times, and that's a big problem with not just Japanese politics, but with Japanese society as a whole. They're way too focused on keeping things as traditional as possible because and to them, change is bad because it's different and scary. To quote Dylan from the SOS podcast.
Yeah. But like I said, you can tell this guy's a good guy. Like, when he makes the call, we're not going to shoot Godzilla because I don't want to risk any civilians. It winds up biting him in the butt a ton later. He winds up dying.
Oh, it does a lot. I was going to say, it does a lot more than that to him.
I think, had they launched an attack on Godzilla in that form, he would have been defenseless. He would have died. I do believe that in that form, because he was already overheating and everything like that, he would have died. He was immobile. Yeah. He was frozen, and they made the wrong call, but they made the wrong call for the right reason. And once again, like at the start of the movie when he says this giant aquatic creature is aquatic, it won't come on land, made the wrong call for the right reason, but it was still 100% the wrong thing to do. But I really liked him, and then followed up with the second prime minister, who was very interesting.
I love his line, like when
soggy noodles.
I knew this job was going to be difficult. I love that line so much.
That is.
I need to paraphrase that line at some point in my life. I say something like, "Oh boy, the coffee's cold. This job's going to be more difficult than I thought."
That's the one clip of this movie that I was willing to post on my channel. Was that one little clip of him talking about the soggy noodles. It was just. It goes to show that
it's a really nice bit of humanization and levity.
Yes. Yeah, it really is. I loved him as a character. I mean, you can tell he is caught between two of the worst situations: a rock and a hard place.
A rock and a hard place, yeah.
A nuclear bomb or Godzilla, and he does not know what to do. And I thought it was very understandable where he was coming from. Him and the first prime minister, very understandable where they were coming from. Understandable their actions. I do think the second prime minister handled things a lot better and knew how to get stuff done correctly, especially when he opted out from the nuclear bomb in order to help preserve the deep freeze project. But yeah, both of those characters I thought were really great. And really, I thought all the characters in the movie were great.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And I feel like, a lot of people. I can understand why people do not I do understand why there are people who are critical of the human characters, and I feel like the way these characters are presented in the film goes hand in hand with the style, with the political drama style of the film. in that it's not a very emotional, like in terms of, like emotional like character journeys or any sort of like personal interpersonal relationships. It's never really the focus of this film. The film is like, you're a bunch of people in an environment that are used to, a very mundane, middle of the road activities, and then here comes this very ridiculous, larger than life thing that's happening. It feels like it's happening in real time. So this is just them reacting to it. And so, like, eventually, we get to learn little bits about these characters throughout the time, as time progresses. I guess maybe it could be possible there are people who don't see these characters as very deep, maybe because maybe it's like the whole language barrier deal, maybe it's like the
Yeah.
whole subtitle reading thing, or maybe it's just they don't understand it's just another culture, very heavily entrenched in a foreign culture that they're not familiar with. Or it could be something else. Maybe they do see everything that we're talking about. They just don't like how that style of characterization.
Yeah.
But either way, yeah. Upon seeing the English dub through the English subbed version through your fan cut, I was able to get a lot of what my friends were describing to me when they saw the movie in subtitled form.
Yeah, and subtitles may have hurt the movie. I don't think so. I would prefer to watch a subbed movie than a dubbed movie, even though there was a Japanese couple sitting in front of me. I think it was the third time I saw the movie,
Hmm.
and afterward they stood up, and I could hear their conversation. Where one of them, I think it was the woman, said to the man like
How
something
old are
about
they?
how they were old. They were older.
Okay, so
Um,
these are people who most likely knew Godzilla from back in the day.
yeah, probably they were.
Or were they foreign? Did they sounded foreign, or did they sounded like they were born and raised in America?
They definitely had accents.
Okay.
But yes, they were older. They were probably like maybe 60s, probably
Hmm.
around there. But
Hmm.
I think it was the woman said to the man something about how inaccurate some of the subtitles were and how they thought that was kind of funny.
That's a thing. That's a big thing, a major part. The thing is, they have to be inaccurate
Oh yeah, but
because when it comes to professional subtitling and when it comes to professional dubbing, you have to make compromises with how characters sound in an English format because not everything is going to translate perfectly when you translate directly from Japanese to English. Maybe some character might make a reference, or a character might make a phrase that English don't understand. Maybe there's like a context that again that will fly over English speakers' heads. So you have to make it so these translators have to keep telling themselves in their head, okay, if this character was American, how would they sound like when they're talk? How would what would their dialogue look like? How would their dialogue sound like if they were fluent English speaking American characters? So they have to find like the American equivalent of all these different phrases that they were saying.
yeah,
Like for instance, they kept using the phrase "sori" a lot, and
that's what I was
"sori"
gonna bring up.
is Japanese for prime minister. So they're always saying like prime minister, da 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 da, prime minister, da 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 da. Of course, you can't really say that without in English because that would make the dialogue too repetitive. So they always have to find different substitutes like sir or mister, or whatever sort of way of addressing someone with greater respect. Or even like if you had a phrase like senpai, I just mentioned, the whole senpai kohai thing, where it's like you give a lot of respect to your older peers, and you are kind of have control over your younger peers. That sort of shit doesn't happen in America, so we don't have an English equivalent to the words senpai and kohai. So if someone were to say senpai, maybe the subtitles would say, "Hey, old buddy," or "Hey, old friend," "Hey, colleague." They'll just replace that word with something that's slightly more American sounding, or something more closer to what we would use as the closest thing we can find. So yeah, it's not surprising that they would find that the subtitles would be inaccurate, because even myself, with limited experience with Japanese, even I'm starting to notice a difference between what's being said in the subtitles of whatever I'm watching, and the few words and few grammatical phrases I'm able to pick up in the actual dialogue itself.
Yeah, and I was gonna bring up that because the big thing they talked about they talked about the big thing that they had was they found it confusing why Sori they specifically said that meant Prime. They
Hmm.
specifically said that, and then they said, one of them said he didn't get why they replaced it with Mister or Sir and it was all
Hmm.
this stuff, but it meant pretty much the same thing. It was a sign of respect, and so
Uh-huh.
yes, they definitely they changed it to make it more American. I just I found that
Hmm.
really interesting. Like
Oh
these
yeah,
people
totally,
sitting
totally.
right in front of me understood the movie. I didn't, and so my interpretation of the movie is different than theirs, even though it was the same movie. And
Yeah.
yeah, I thought that was not only interesting, but I think that's kind of cool.
Oh yeah,
Just
totally, totally. It's
yeah.
very interesting to see how
Hmm.
people from different cultures or different languages can, or people who can understand both sides of languages can each have a different experience with a foreign film or a film attempting to embrace multiple cultures at the same time.
Yeah. And about the dubbed version, we briefly
I mean,
mentioned
subbed.
dubbed. No,
Oh,
dubbed.
oh.
They have not. I have not found 100% confirmation that it's going to happen,
Hmm.
but I've heard rumors of people saying that supposedly the DVD release will include a dubbed version
Hmm.
as well as the subbed version. Now, is this true? I'm not 100% sure, but from what I've heard, supposedly this happened with some sort of other movies Funimation released. I don't know if they mentioned live action Attack on Titan or not, but they mentioned certain movies were released by Funimations in Japanese or even anime, and then when they came out on DVD later, included a dubbed version. So I'm really interested in hoping that they do have a dubbed version.
Huh.
That way I could watch the two back to back and find out like how much difference there is, because there is always a difference when you see the subbed versus dubbed. It is always the case.
Hmm.
No, and also
So,
just the English dubs in
so,
general have a lot missing.
so you're saying that the Attack on Titan American Blu-ray release actually has a dub?
Now,
Because
I'm not
I know
100% sure.
Gorizard has it, but I keep forgetting to ask him myself.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure. I've just heard people talking about previous Funimation releases, and I can't quite remember if they mentioned that one. I know leading up to this movie, someone sent me Attack on Titan movies in Japanese,
Uh-huh.
so I'm not quite sure if there's English cuts
Nope.
available.
I'm checking the Blu-ray right now on Amazon. The American Attack on Titan movie Part 1 Blu-ray DVD combo. I'm looking at the languages and subtitles right here. So let's see on Amazon again. So language Japanese, subtitles English. Oh wait, oh hold on. So wait. Dubbed English. Okay, so never mind. I'm an idiot. So it looks like there is an English dub here.
Yeah, so hopefully they do that with um, Shin Godzilla. I will still probably watch the subbed version more, just because I always prefer the subbed versions more.
Hmm.
It just most Godzilla fans do, but I just I just I find that interesting how they were supposedly originally going to hold off on a English release of the movie till
Hmm.
they could dub it, and then all of a sudden it was announced it was going to be subbed by Funimations, or it was going to be subbed by Funimation instead of dubbed. So I don't know. I won't know until next year, I guess.
We'll just have to wait and see.
And
Although if there is a dub, it'll be probably be amazing to hear the Funimation to try to see if we can pick up any Funimation voice actors in here.
yeah, just see if there's like any regulars that they bring back.
Yeah, maybe
Um,
we'll end up picking up on Goku or Piccolo's voices.
that'd be cool. uh, maybe Goku is Rando. Who knows?
I could see that kind of working. You know, he's roughly Sean Schimmel is roughly Rondo's age.
Who knows? Um, but other than that, we
Just have Vegeta jump over Godzilla himself.
oh that'd be
I am the king. I am Godzilla, the king of monsters, puny humans.
oh man. Oh, speaking of that show,
Yeah.
have you seen all of the jokes people have been making about you see like picture of Godzilla as like one of his first forms, just like captioned, "This isn't even my final form."
Maybe I maybe saw that a couple months
I've
back.
been seeing this so much recently. It has gotten annoying. Just so many jokes about it. It's ridiculous.
I guess I should count myself lucky then.
Yeah, I especially see it on like any video, pretty much any video I talk about. This is what Godzilla's origins are. The comments are, "This isn't even my final form."
I am using only 10% of my power level.
Oh man. Yeah, I don't know. Only the future will tell with this movie
Yeah.
and the sequels and all that stuff. So I'm really excited. I honestly I know I have that feeling they gotta make a sequel, and I hope it's good. So
Hmm.
I don't see any reason why it wouldn't be. Um, Other than that, what rating would you give it?
I'm definitely going to be giving this a 4 out of 5. I did enjoy this much more having having been able to understand significant portions of the movie than I did when I saw it in Japanese theaters. And my greatest my greatest concern when I initially made my review based on my experiences watching the Japanese only version was its treatment of the characters. Luckily, I feel like there was enough character interaction, enough character depth in here to complement a lot of the action and the political drama in this movie. Unfortunately, there having seen it multiple times now, I can definitely see there are significant problems with the pacing as well as its scientific exposition, and also the uh, anticlimactic ending. Although I feel like that is the least of this movie's problems.
Yeah.
So overall, it's a great movie. Certainly not perfect. It's got a few kinks in the armor, but otherwise, it's an incredibly solid movie that I'll be sure to pick up whenever a full-on official English release comes out. Although even before then, I still want to at least get it on Japanese Blu-ray because just so I can say I own a legitimate Japanese Blu-ray for once. I feel like it seems appropriate to have the first Godzilla movie I've seen to see in a Japanese theater during my first year of Japan. It feels like it feels appropriate to own a Japanese Blu-ray of that movie.
Yeah. Um, I do my ratings out of 10. Uh,
Hmm.
I would give it a 9 out of 10. I thought this movie was just absolutely amazing. The music, the visuals, I've said this a million times to a million different people. This is the most visually rich Godzilla movie ever. Even if the CG wasn't perfect, the angles, the cool things that they do with the camera, we have never seen anything like that with the Godzilla movie. And it is really original, as well as Godzilla being really original, a new, fresh take on Godzilla. The characters being great. I mean, it has humor in there, just a whole bunch of stuff. The only problem I had with it was because I tend to look past false in science exposition, and I make up my own reasoning, but it is no one can argue that this movie has good pacing because it doesn't. It
Hmm.
falls flat in the pacing, and that is what loses its point for me. Is I feel like had they shortened down these scenes or maybe added more Godzilla, I don't know which one of the two would have helped, but I feel like probably shortening the long periods without him um,
Hmm.
would have kept the flow going and would have made it a pretty much perfect movie for what it was trying to be. And even we briefly mentioned this. Even this movie has such rich allegory in it. Amazing way to connect to the '54 movie, which is one of the most allegorical rich movies ever that I can think of, and it's just really cool to see that they carried that with them when making this movie, and I love this movie so much. I've seen it a million times already, and I will watch it a million more when I finally get a good copy. So I once again cannot recommend this movie enough. When it comes out on release on DVD or Blu-ray, make sure you pick it up. It is worth seeing. So, anything you want to promote here at the end before we wrap up?
Let's see. So you can check out you can check out my channel at KaijuNoir, KaijuNoir. There you can find many movie reviews, comic book reviews, a couple TV reviews, and even my own podcast, Shoe Watch, which initially was started out as a conversation piece that allowed me to chat with Adam and Gorizard. I kind of over time converted it into an interview show where I can bring on independent artists and writers and help them promote their work. Outside of that, you can also check me out on the on Zazabar's channel on the Sons of Sarazawa podcast. If you happen to be a fan of Kevin Smith's style of shooting the shit style podcast and with a tokusatsu spin to it, you can definitely check out the SOS podcast because we talk about everything under the sun and occasionally Godzilla. And outside of that, you can check out my Facebook page not Facebook page, well, rather the Facebook page, the Tokusatsu themed Facebook page that the SOS and I run called Toku Legion. And you can also follow me on Instagram where I upload artwork from my channel, and as well as a few Gundam related pictures, images that I happen to come across or create through the various Gundam games and figures that I own. And let's see. Also, my Instagram is also KaijuNoir. And in terms of future upcoming works, I recently finished my review of Rebirth of Mothra, so you can look forward to my upcoming review of Rebirth of Mothra 2, as well as my review for the independent kaiju comic Kodoja, written by my friend. Oh my God, how am I blanking out on my friend's name? My friend. Let's see, it's his last name that I'm blanking out on, so I really don't want to give him the shout out without Keith Foster. Thank you so much, Facebook. My friend Keith Foster's book Kodoja, Volume 1, Terror Mountain Showdown. And outside of that, anything else? Oh yeah, I'm also planning on bringing back. I started experimenting with a viewer request type of show in the past. And I'm thinking about bringing it back, only to simplify it into a shorter format in order to create weekly videos, short weekly videos that would allow me to be able to entertain my subscribers and viewers in between the long gaps between my more complex scripted reviews. So I hope you'll enjoy my first rebooted series, my first rebooted installment of my viewer request series with a review for Godzilla Battle Royale.
All right. Thank you for joining me with this Shin Gojira review. I know a lot of people have been looking forward to my full, in-depth thoughts on this movie, and I think we basically beat it to death. So, thank you for everyone who's watching. I hope you enjoyed. See you guys next time. D-Man out.
I have been KaijuNoir, and until next time, take care.